That's it. Now, if you speak, they're gonna hear you.
Eileen, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good.
How you going?
Well, you and I are the only two people on here. There was one case that I don't know whether I brought it into this room, that I couldn't figure out who they were. And when we heard the case, if we did,
What one was it?
I'm listening for it.
Okay.
Having trouble finding it now. It's Burke, B-U-R-K-E.
Let me see. I think we heard them already. Burke. Yeah, we heard them last week.
We heard them already. Are we going to give them a decision tonight?
No, we did it last time, December 5th.
Oh, it was done, that it was completed.
Well, the application was, yeah, we did. They came before the board on December 5th.
So they're done now?
The application is done. Yeah, the resolution won't be ready till the next meeting. But they were approved.
Okay, I wrote it down. That solves that problem. Are we going to start tonight with continuation of the Chai Center?
Yeah, you should have received a revised agenda. First matter is Kai Center.
I got the revised agenda. I don't think I printed it.
Yeah, we're gonna do the Kai Center first, and then the carryover Subatovsky, and then New Singular Wireless.
And then who?
30 Bleecker Street, New Singular Wireless.
I must have that somewhere in here. Then we go to Ridgewood Avenue.
No, then we're doing Milton on Highland Avenue and then Chestnut Place. The last two are not being heard tonight. We're going to carry them to January.
All right, hold on, let me get the last two out of here. The last two are which ones?
670 Ridgewood is being carried, and 3903 to Whitcop is being carried.
All right, hold on. Highland Avenue, we are gonna hear.
Sorry?
Do we have Highland Avenue on?
Yeah, they'll be after the cell.
It'll be after who?
They're after New Singular Wireless.
Yeah, I must have these out of order. Chestnut Place, we're not hearing.
Yeah, Chestnut Place is the last one we're doing.
It is the last one.
Yes.
All right, let me put it last here. I may have these out of order.
Yeah, I sent a revised agenda around today. You should have gotten it. Given the new order.
I don't dare go look for it now, or I'll lose you and me and everything. Chestnut Place, we are or are not hearing.
We are.
Chestnut Place is the last case we're hearing.
Yes.
Hmm. Should I be seeing you now?
No, I don't have my video on.
Do I have mine on? Let me see.
No, you do not.
I do not. I do now. Who's singing Chestnut? Can you see me now?
Yes.
It's very strange that you and I are the only two people on here. Normally, this board,
No, no one's been signing on till like 5 minutes before the meeting.
so Sabatovsky is not going first.
No, they're going second.
Tell me again, who's going first?
Kai Center is going first.
Oh, the Phi Center, yeah. Then Sabatovsky. And then who?
Then Singular Wireless.
I gotta find Singular Wireless. I don't know why it's not here. The next one that I have is.
They're probably at the bottom of your, because they were going to be last, but we had to move them to third.
I'll look at the bottom. At the bottom, I have Highland Avenue. Hmm. Eileen, you're telling me Burke is done,
Yes.
decided, and resolution for next week. Right?
Resolution, it should be ready for the first meeting in January, yes.
I don't mean next week. I mean the first meeting in January. I seem to be missing one. Tell me again what the next to last case is, or the last case.
The first case is the Kai Center, second is Subatovsky, third is New Singular Wireless.
That's the one I'm missing. What are they here for?
Antenna.
That's the one down on off Main Street,
Yeah, Bleecker Street.
Bleecker Street, yeah.
And
I-
then Milton on Highland Avenue. And then Biracor on Chestnut Place.
I have Highland Avenue. What about Whitcop?
They're being carried to January 9th.
I think that antenna case, for some reason or other, I thought we'd heard that. And I threw it out.
This is the second, this is a different carrier at the same location.
I don't seem to have that case. Ridgewood Road is not being heard tonight.
That's correct. They're being carried.
Good evening, folks.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi, good evening.
Hello, everyone.
Everybody.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone.
Hey, Ashley.
hey,
All right, Eileen, I think we're all here.
And the one who's not here is Wolfgang.
Right. Is he coming? He's
I
coming.
have not heard from him, so I don't. But, I mean, I guess we could. I didn't hear anything from him, which is,
Yeah, he usually reaches out.
yeah.
I don't have his cell phone. All right, well, let's get started and see if he jumps in.
In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, be advised that notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and mailing to the officially designated newspapers a list of the meeting dates annually, indicating that this meeting would be taking place on Monday, December 19th at 7 p.m. via Zoom webinar. Amy Lawrence,
Here.
Jody Sharma,
Here,
Joseph Steinberg,
here,
Steve Toger,
Here.
Chandru Harjani,
Here.
Ashley Avigdor,
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Jessica Glatt,
Here.
Chairman Craig Klettner.
Here.
Oh, hold on, Wolfgang is here.
Yeah, it's just, I think that's gonna call, it was just calling me.
Okay, so Wolfgang is now here and we're good to go.
Great. So we will start this evening. We have two sets of minutes that we need to approve. First set being of 11/7/22. Who's eligible to vote on that?
Who was not here? Let's see, Amy, Jody, Joe, Steve, Chandru, Ashley, Jessica, Craig.
Okay, any change? Just Wolfing, okay. Any changes, corrections to that set of minutes? If not, can I have a motion to adopt?
I move approval.
Thank you, Steve. And a second?
I'll say.
Second.
Actually, just roll call then. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, next up, we have the minutes of 11/21/22. Similar group, Eileen?
The only eligible are Joe, Steve, Wolfgang, Jessica, Craig.
Okay, so,
Board that week.
okay, yeah, that's right. So if there are any changes or corrections, if not, can I have a motion from one of those people?
I move approval of the minutes of November 21st.
Second.
Thank you, Steve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay,
Mr.
So,
Chairman, I would
couple
like-
thing. I'm sorry.
I would like to speak for a few minutes.
Okay, give me 2 seconds, Joe. Just want to make an announcement quick regarding the applications this evening. Okay. Just so everyone understands that we'll be carrying calendar 390022 to 1923, that's 670 Ridgewood Road, M. Camaros and P. Manis. So if you're here on that case, that'll be carried until January 9th, 23. And also calendar 390322. That case will also be carried to January 9th, 23. The applicant is Geo Fang Ki and Yang Ming Pan at 2 Whipcott Place.
So
And
with
that's
regard,
the
so
on-site
so with,
meeting.
yeah, so let's talk a minute about those two matters that have been carried. So Eileen, they're gonna be live meetings?
We will be on site. We will no longer
Right.
be, we no longer.
Okay,
be-
so either Craig or Eileen, if you can just announce in terms of the fact that those hearings will be live meetings and provide the address and the time when that hearing will commence on each case.
They will be carried to January 9th, 2023, 7 PM at Millburn Town Hall, Township Committee Room,
Okay, what's the address, Eileen?
375 Millburn Avenue.
Thank you.
Those meetings start at 7 PM.
Correct.
So if you're here on those cases, they will not be heard tonight, back on January 9th in person. So Joe. the
And
floor is
no,
yours.
I'm sorry, Craig,
No
my
further
bad. And no further notice is going to be provided by the applicants with regard to either one of those applications.
Correct, thank you. Joe, go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to tell everyone on the board, some of you already know, that I'm going to resign effective the 31st of December. For all intents and purposes, tonight is really my last meeting. I don't know when I came on this board. I have minutes or annual report somewhere among these papers from 2008, and I had already attained the rank of vice chair by 2008. I think I came on the board around 2002 or 2003, maybe 2004 or 2005. I'm not sure, and it certainly doesn't make any difference at this point. I am very, very pleased with the fact that I've been associated with this board for all these years. I know that those of you who are on this board now are equally happy with the fact that you're on the board and that you're making a difference in this town. I want to read to you a couple of sentences from an annual report from 2012. Many, if not most of the approvals were granted only after the board insisted on changes to the plans, most resulting in reducing the extent to which deviations from the zoning regulations were sought and impose significant conditions to ameliorate impacts on the surrounding properties. And B, in some cases, in response to board concerns raised during hearings, applicants sought adjournments to enable them to file new plans, which required either fewer violations, variances, or variances departing less from ordinance requirements, or both. That has been true for all the years that I've been on the board. And it makes me very pleased and happy to know that that is the way the board functions and the way it thinks about cases. I think that this is a very strong board. When I came on the board, we had a different zoning officer. Eileen has done a spectacular job. We've had a different attorney. Rob has done a great job. We had different people on the board, and you all have done terrific work. Craig is very, very powerful as a chair of the board. And Jessica has been on this board for many years. I know, I don't even know when she came on the board. I know that in 2016, she was definitely a member of this board, and that was 6 years ago. So Jessica, that was probably what, 2010, 11 when you came on the board? Sometime around then. You don't even know. I feel less bad now that I don't know. But this is a very strong board. The people who have been on this board for some years, Craig, Jessica, Steve, Toger, are strong-willed and very powerful people. And it's been my pleasure to associate with them. Rob has done a great job as the attorney for the board since he's come on. And Mr. Fishman, your dad was the court reporter for years when I first came on the board. The rest of you have all buckled down and seen yourselves as guardians of the zoning in this town. And it makes me very pleased to be able to walk away after, I don't know how many years I've been around here, to know that these folks who are on the board go to see the properties. They know what they're talking about. They are happy to grant variances when they're truly necessary, but not at all afraid to say no when they should say no. In any event, it's been my pleasure to associate myself with every one of you. And I'm very happy to leave the board knowing that it's in great hands. So give yourselves a pat on the back for being terrific board members, every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for your kind words. And as I said, I think last year, my command of municipal land use law is can be directly attributed to your amazing tutelage over the years and the example that you set as a board member. And I'm sure the rest of the board feels the same. Sitting underneath you, of what we've learned and what we know is probably, not even a portion of what you forgot over the years in terms of your vast knowledge of municipal land use law. So we greatly appreciate your service to the township and to this board. And you'll be very difficult to duplicate. I still have large shoes to fill, that's for sure.
You're doing a great job.
So with that, we will get on with our evening.
Mr. Chair, if I may just join, I will keep it brief as I echo.
Sure, please, Jody.
I like echo Joe's comments, and Joe has done a tremendous job. I'll be resigning at the end of my term of 5 years serving on Millburn Zoning Board and also serving as a liaison to the Historic Preservation Commission, which now Jessica has taken over. But I still remember the first day I joined when Joe took me around and drove me around the town and showed me each and every property. So I can't thank him enough for his tutelage and all that I've learned from every single board member on this board. It's been an honor and pleasure to serve on the Millburn Board of Adjustment. And I wish you all the very best, as you're all very capable board members. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. And we really appreciate your service to the board and to the township. So with that, we'll begin our evening. We have quite a few cases tonight. As we said, we're going to pass to the 9th. And for the last case of the evening will be Milton. So I'm making a little of an adjustment there as I need to recuse from that one. So we're going to switch that to be the last case for the evening. And Jessica will take it out. So with that, we'll be starting with calendar 3821, High Center. This matter has been heard now for almost a year, or about a year, I think. So tonight we will bring it to its conclusion. So Mr. Levine, if you would join us.
Sorry, just a question. Eileen, in terms of this documentation, when should that happen?
Rob, Amy has her oath of her affidavit of certification that she listened to it. I told her to wait and sign it at the meeting tonight so that you could witness her signature. She didn't have a chance to have it notarized and send it in. So
Right.
yeah.
So let's see, Mr. Levine is here, which is good. Amy, before we get to that, Mr. Levine, are we bringing anyone over from your team other than you?
No, I'm the only one.
Okay. So Eileen, right before Amy sort of signs in our presence, can you just identify where we are in terms of this application, in terms of eligible board members?
So Amy Lawrence and Jody had to listen to the last meeting of November 21st. Both did indicate that they watched the meeting. And I believe Jody sent me a copy of her signed affidavit. Amy hadn't signed it yet, so I told her to sign it while you watched tonight, so we would have present. Steve had to watch the June 20th meeting. He had done that a while ago, sent me his affidavit. Sean Drew had to watch the June 20th and November 21st. I did not hear from Sean Drew, so I don't know if he had done that. So I don't know where he stands on that.
No, I have not yet.
Okay, so alternate one, well, so then I guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 7 members to vote.
So
Amy.
Amy, Amy, why don't
Yes.
you sign in our presence? So you're,
I'm gonna sign
okay,
right now.
great. Yep. And then Eileen, can you please, for the boards, the public's and Mr. Levine's edification, just identify, thank you, Amy,
There you go.
who is eligible to vote this evening?
So voting this evening, eligible are Amy Lawrence, Jody Sharma, Joe Steinberg, Steve Toger, Wolfgang Taturis, Jessica Glatt, and Craig Whitner. Those are, and Ashley, but she's an alternate, so she would be number 8. So those are the 7 that will be voting.
So Ashley will,
She will not
Will
be
not be
voting.
voting.
No.
Mr. Levine, do you have any questions about eligibility of board members?
I don't. It sounds to me as though we have 7 eligible, and appreciate all the board members doing the homework necessary to become eligible, and we have the benefit of a full 7-member voting board. So I thank you for your extra efforts in that regard.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Levine, your comments. Should we like to close?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good evening. Michael Levine, attorney with Fox Rothschild, here this evening on behalf of the applicant. As the chairman correctly pointed out, the hearings in this matter, although they've been spaced out roughly every 2 to 3 months, did start close to the beginning of the year. In fact, I think the application was deemed complete, I want to say in July of the year before. So it certainly has been something on your docket for quite some time. I know it's generated a lot of interest among the public. Folks have taken time out to attend these meetings, participate, and we thank the board for its careful, attention to our application. And I'm here to just we've closed the public portion. Our direct testimony is completed. I'm here to just briefly sum up, try to highlight what I feel are some of the more important aspects of our application, and await the board's deliberation and vote. As the board will recall, there are kind of 2 issues here before we kind of get to the guts of the D3 conditional use variance relief and bulk variance relief that we're seeking, as well as site plan approval. There was, of course, the threshold issue as to res judicata / collateral estoppel. There have been other applications with seeking approval for a house of worship at this property in the past. Copies of those prior resolutions were submitted with our application materials. And as kind of a threshold issue, there was a fair amount of testimony. In fact, we submitted a copy of the site plans that were submitted previously to the board. We had our engineer, Mike Lanzafama, compare those plans with the current plans that are before the board in connection with this application. You also heard testimony from our planners with regard to the res judicata issues. And our view certainly is that what you have before you is a different application, similar in many important respects, certainly, but also significantly different in other important respects as well. As you'll recall, and when I say the prior application, I'm talking primarily about the one in 2001 that contemplated taking the existing single-family residence, keeping it intact, also keeping the existing residential use of that building intact, and adding to it a house of worship. So you were going to have essentially 2 uses on the property, a house of worship and also a single family use, which, unlike what's before you now, would contemplate and require kind of constant occupancy, constant use, as opposed to more sporadic uses would be the case with a property that's exclusively used as a house of worship. This application contemplates a complete demolition of the both existing single-family residences on the property and the construction of a single house of worship. You had extensive testimony from our architect, Mr. Dubonnet, with regard to his design inspiration and what he drew upon in designing this application, primarily with respect to the existing architecture and existing residences in the immediate neighborhood. Along Bodwell in particular, in an effort to try to design a structure that would be compatible and in keeping both in terms of scale and also in terms of design with residential use in general, and also the particular residential structures in the vicinity of the subject property. By virtue of demolishing and rebuilding the house of worship with a new footprint location, we were able to significantly increase the setbacks from Millburn Avenue in particular, but also slightly with regard to Bodwell Terrace. Whereas in the prior application, which by the way was also a conditional use variance application seeking D3 relief, the existing setback from Millburn Avenue was 43.72 feet. By demolishing and rebuilding the proposed house of worship in its new location, we're increasing that setback to 69.87 feet from Millburn Avenue. I did mention there's also a very slight increase in the setback from Bodwell Terrace, just to have a record complete and give you a sense of what those numbers are. The existing setback, which would have been the setback had the prior application been approved, the setback from Bodwell is 39.16 feet, and that was slightly increased with the relocation to 40 feet from Bodwell. There was also testimony this time with regard to an additional potential source of off-site parking. It was extensive testimony about the size of the congregation, the anticipated uses of the house of worship, the number of congregants that would be on site for the various days of the week. And virtually all of the time, with the exception really of the high holy days, it's anticipated that the 25 on-site parking spaces would be more than adequate to serve all of the anticipated worshipers that would be visiting the site. The applicant did concede that on high holy days in particular, there's a significantly increased attendance and parking demand on site. This time around, there was testimony with regard to an additional potential source of off-site parking to help mitigate any adverse impacts from those handful of high holy days, in particular being in addition to Millburn High School, which we testified to not only this time, but in 2001. The rabbi had also approached St. Rose for an additional potential source of off-site parking as and when needed. Also, the number of on-site parking spaces that we were proposing this time around is 40% greater than the number of on-site parking spaces that were proposed in 2001, as shown on the site plan, none of which would be occupied and taken up and used by an on-site residential residential family. They would all be available all of the time for worshipers due to the single use of the property. Also in 2001, the board found as a finding of fact that there was inadequate buffering in connection with that proposal. This time around, we have a report from the township engineer, which was dated January 31st, 2002. With regard to grading, soiling, and grading, soil erosion.
I'm sorry, Mr. Levine, I
Yes.
apologize. I just want to make sure the record's clear.
Yes.
When you say January 31st, is that 2002? You talking about the prior application?
No, I'm talking about the memorandum from Martha Callahan, the township engineer, that's dated January 31st, 2022.
Okay, I think you misspoke. That's why I just wanted to correct you.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So yeah, the memo that I'm just about to read a short excerpt from was from 2022 in connection with this application.
Thank you.
I did, leading into that, I did say that in connection with the 2001 application, the zoning board made a finding of fact that in connection with that proposal, the buffering was inadequate.
I understood.
So in connection with the current township engineer's review memo, she notes there's a sizable amount of landscaping proposed in front of the walls, which will soften the look of the walls and help preserve the slope stability. And she continues on in paragraph 3 to say there's a substantial buffer of evergreen trees proposed in the area separating the proposed structure and parking lot from the adjacent residential property to the north and along the front property line on Bodwell Terrace. And also we did, as part of our review memo package, received a memorandum from the Millburn Township Forester dated November 22nd, 2021, again in connection with the current application, with the only comment being a Millburn Township tree removal permit application will be required, which just note kind of anecdotally, it's somewhat rare to receive a separate review memo from a township forester that doesn't at least recommend different landscaping species or different additional plantings in some regard. So we certainly feel that this application and this proposal is more well buffered from surrounding land uses than was the case the first time around. And lastly, res judicata goes to not only differences in the two applications, but also to the extent there may be changed circumstances on the site or in the surrounding area that could, render the potential impacts of the proposal less significant or less severe. And we, through our planner, did provide testimony that, and I'm sure the board also takes judicial notice of the fact that over the intervening years, there has been a significant amount of not only multifamily approved development, but also commercial development in the general vicinity of the subject property. So those are the reasons that we had put on the record, among others, but those I think are highlighting some of the most compelling reasons why we feel that this really should be considered a new application, a different application that deserves a new look with fresh eyes. So having spoken with regard to res judicata, we go into the kind of the traditional positive and negative criteria analysis that this board routinely undertakes with regard to D variances, in this case, D3 conditional use variance. Positive and negative criteria. The positive criteria here, we're inherently beneficial use, which essentially satisfies the positive criteria. It doesn't obviate the need to also satisfy and analyze the negative criteria, but not only by case law, but also in prior resolutions that have been adopted by the zoning board here in town. It's been acknowledged that houses of worship are inherently beneficial uses. That does leave, however, the negative criteria. And as the board is well aware, the two prongs of it: substantial detriment to the public good, and also substantial impairment of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. And we hear those phrases a lot. We apply them a lot, but it's always important to kind of focus on and remember that we are talking about a substantial detriment here, particularly when you're talking about a conditional use. And certainly the Coventry Square case talks about the extent to which a site can still accommodate the proposed use, notwithstanding the deviations from the conditional use standard, and where there would be a substantial detriment to the public good if the board were to approve what the applicant is proposing. Here, we certainly had lots of input and lots of concerns from the neighbors. And for the most part, I think it's fair to characterize most of them having to do with concerns relative to increased detrimental use of Bodwell Terrace in terms of pedestrian traffic, in terms of parking. That seemed to be, in my recollection, in my view, kind of a consistent theme that was emphasized by a number of the neighbors in the area. Would like to point out that currently, and has been the case literally for decades, there's an existing active driveway on Bodwell Terrace where two separate single-family homes and all of the occupants are free to use that for both ingress and egress on a regular basis. We're proposing to entirely eliminate that access as a means of general everyday ingress and egress. As was recommended in the township engineer's memo, we are preserving a curb cut there with grass pavers for emergency access only. There is no, not only is there no intention to use that for everyday regular ingress and egress, but as the plans show and as was testified to, there is bollards and chains in place to prevent regular use by passenger vehicles. And again, it's not paved; it's grass pavers with the grass growing up in between to give it a more a residential look and feel in that area, as opposed to would be the case of just a flat paved asphalt driveway. In many ways, as is the case in many towns in northern New Jersey, an older, well-established, mature, fairly densely populated residential community like Millburn, it's difficult to find a spot in a residential zone that's would be significantly, better suited for this house of worship than this lot, in the sense that if you look at the immediately surrounding uses, directly to the west, there's an existing cemetery. Directly to the south, there's a heavily traveled, probably one of the more heavily traveled streets in town, County Road, Millburn Avenue. To the east, there's Bodwell Terrace. So we have the benefit of not having a residential user, a residential neighbor immediately adjacent to us to the east. There's a separation of Bodwell Terrace itself. And then to the north, there is a single residence to the north of us. And with regard to that residence, that's where much of the heavy buffering that's alluded to in the engineer's report is proposed and is shown on our landscaping plan. There's an existing fence in that area to further screen what's going on the subject property from that existing residence. We are requesting conditional use variance for the required buffer from a residential use. That variance is listed on the zoning chart is 7.9 feet, which is the most severe or extreme area. As I pointed out during testimony, as you travel from west to east, the way the lot line goes, as you travel further east, that buffer gets larger and larger, and where it's at its smallest point, where we've listed as the 7.9 feet, that's where the existing fence is in place to help buffering there. Another conditional use variance that we require is parking setback. Again, the most severe encroachment into that requirement is to the west, facing the cemetery use, which is certainly not a sensitive nearby land use, certainly not as sensitive as would be the case if it were existing active residential. In terms of the folks on Bodwell, it's interesting, it was actually noted as a criticism, I think, in the township's planner's report, that the main access and main entrance to the proposed house of worship is facing to the west. So with that being the case, all of the heaviest activity, the parking circulation, the folks going in and out of the house of worship is all happening on the west side of the proposed facility. So the facility itself buffers all of that activity from people who live further to the east along Bodwell. The rabbi provided a lot of testimony with regard to the size of his congregation, what would be going on at the facility, and how many people typically attend. And that testimony supports the fact that the 25 on-site parking spaces would easily accommodate their anticipated use. Again, kind of in the same vein of some of the concerns expressed by the neighbors, there's really no sound reason to believe that there's going to be additional parking happening on Bodwell. Again, just given the numbers that have been testified to, the on-site parking will be able to accommodate that. Any additional pedestrian traffic that might be generated on those handful of days when there's a increased demand, the high holy days in particular, to the extent that that's going to generate additional pedestrian traffic, that's going to be on the opposite side of Bodwell from those residences along the east. So you're talking about pedestrian traffic on the other side of the street and pedestrian traffic that would take a left into the facility before it goes further north, where these folks would have to be walking by existing residential uses. So with that being the case, although that make some of our neighbors uneasy or wish that there was a lower activity level, I would submit to the board that that certainly is not something, increased pedestrian traffic on the opposite side of the street is not something I think that can fairly say rises to the level of a substantial detriment to the public good. We also provided the very last hearing before this evening, additional planning testimony with regard to how this site and this proposed facility in particular compares with other existing houses of worship in town. And there's kind of been an assumption or a notion that it's kind of out of hand ridiculous to think that with a 3-acre minimum zoning requirement for this conditional use, that a lot that's less than 1 acre, in our case 0.85 acres, could possibly, reasonably be expected to accommodate the impacts and the usage that would result from the introduction of a house of worship. But when we take a look at some of the existing houses of worship in town, as was testified to and as we found, strictly with regard to lot area, the proposed high center is 5th in a list of 12 existing houses of worship. There are 4 others that have minimum with lot areas less than ours. The 6th, St. Stephen's, has a lot area larger than ours, but still well below the 3-acre minimum that's required. And when these other houses of worship were constructed is less relevant than how are they functioning today on their existing lots, given the way the membership has evolved, their uses have evolved, kind of a multiplicity of uses that you're seeing today with houses of worship, how all of that has evolved. Is the site still accommodating the house of worship use, notwithstanding its small lot size and its deviation from that significant conditional use standard? We have no reason to believe that any of these existing houses of worship are functioning otherwise than just well. We're not aware of any problems, issues, complaints, certainly none that were voiced during the course of our hearings before the board. Same is also true with regard to building coverage, as Mr. Flynn testified to. Our proposed house of worship has a 12% proposed building coverage there, which falls 4th in order of the 12 existing houses of worship in town. And also I had submitted to the board under my letter dated June 10th, 2022, that there have been prior zoning board approvals of other houses of worship in town that just on their face, the findings of fact and the conclusions of law would seem to be significantly more potentially impactful than what we're proposing here. And the 2 in particular that I had highlighted in my submission to the board, the first involved the Wyoming Presbyterian Church. And just briefly, I had summarized and also provided copies of the resolutions of approval that the zoning board had adopted. They too were proposing a building expansion. In that case, it was for childcare. Was also a conditional use with a 3-acre minimum lot area requirement. That's one of the houses of worship that's smaller than the subject property, 0.77 acres. They were proposing building coverage double what was permitted under the ordinance, and we're not promoting any on-site parking whatsoever. And notwithstanding those findings, in fact, the board concluded that the expansion of the property will not create any negative impacts. The same facility was granted additional variance relief by the zoning board in 2008 for a further expansion, and the findings of fact in that instance made clear a couple of things. The proposal called for an outdoor terrace, essentially inviting people outside of the house of worship outdoors, where presumably noise would be more, children running around, more potentially impactful to nearby residential neighbors. The church had 400 members, 150 children in Sunday school that had programming 5 days a week in both the mornings and the afternoons. Again, in a smaller lot with no on-site parking. And again, the second time around, the zoning board granted the D3 variance relief in that instance. And another example that I had brought up was Congregation B'nai Israel. That was actually a planning board application. It was not a zoning board. But again, calling for an expansion of an existing temple, 160 Millburn Avenue. Again, a much larger facility. That temple served 510 families. Expansion was needed in their view for additional classrooms and a social hall. And applying the same negative criteria, the planning board in that instance found that there would be no substantial detriment to the public good associated with granting D3 variance relief for a facility of that scale. And just finally, with regard to these potential substantial impairment to the zone plan and zoning ordinance, there are 12 separate conditional use standards imposed on houses of worship. In our case, we comply with 8 of the 12. The parking deviation we're seeking approval for here is much less severe than, as I just mentioned, other houses of worship that have been approved in the past by the zoning board. And there are very important aspects with which we comply that are common measures of potential impact on the neighborhood and the zone plan. We comply with the zoning requirements with regard to building height, building coverage. There's 23% maximum permitted. We're only proposing 11.74%. With regard to FAR, 36% maximums permitted. We are only proposing 28.02%. Lot coverage, 45% maximum is permitted. We're only proposing 44.19, which is close to the max, but still under and in compliance. So for that reason, we feel that approving this proposal would present neither a substantial detriment to the public good or a substantial impairment of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. And that, I think, summarizes the highlights of our extensive testimony. And again, I thank you for hearing and considering our application. And I would urge the board to vote in favor this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Mr. Simon,
Yes.
do you have any comments?
Sure. So, Mr. Levine, thank you. So, as I believe the chair is teeing me up, I had mentioned at the conclusion of the last hearing, and I think Mr. Toger had asked me the question as to sort of what are we doing in terms of deliberation and vote with regard to this application. And I had indicated at the time that what I intended to do was to provide some legal instructions, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, to the board to take into consideration with regard to this particular house of worship application. And I'm going to go slowly, but I'm hoping to provide a comprehensive overview as to what you are faced with in terms of considering this application, as well as providing some procedural recommendations as to how to parse out the various deliberation and voting, whether it is the res judicata issue that Mr. Levine mentioned, and or the underlying relief that the applicant seeks. So what I'm going to start with, because this is a house of worship application, and because the applicant, as part of their submission, as well as testimony provided by at least one, I recall Mr. McDonough, if not two professional planners, has to do with the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act of 2000, otherwise known as the RLUIPA law. And so, to remind the board, the RLUIPA law is a civil rights law, and it protects religious assemblies and religious institutions from discriminatory and unduly burdensome land use regulations. And what it does is it prohibits the implementation of any land use regulation that imposes a substantial burden on the religious exercise of a person or religious assembly or institution, except where it is justified by a compelling governmental interest. And to have that compelling governmental interest, the law further states that the government needs to pursue that interest in the least restrictive way possible. And of course, a burden of inquiry there is very fact sensitive, and typically the courts look to the degree in which a zoning restriction, land use restriction, is likely to impair the ability of a person or a group of people to engage in the religious exercise in question. RLUIPA law also provides that religious assemblies and institutions must be treated at least as well as non-religious assemblies and institutions. And RLUIPA law also prohibits discrimination against any assembly or institution on the basis of religion or religious denomination. And it also provides that governments may not totally exclude religious assemblies or a particular religious assembly from a jurisdiction. So if you look at the RLUIPA law and talking about the fact that governments cannot unreasonably limit religious assemblies, institutions, structures within a jurisdiction, that the use of a building, the conversion of a building, like in this case, that would be considered to be, in my opinion, a religious exercise, including construction, expansion, and the like. And that also includes the facilities. And it's not just the prayer hall, so to speak. It is also accessory uses, whether it is like a fellowship hall or a meeting room, classrooms for religious education, and similar types of functions. And it goes without saying that because the RLUIPA law is a federal law, where there's a conflict between the RLUIPA law and how a particular zoning code is applied, because you're not the governing body, you're just looking at the zoning code, and you're determining whether the applicant meets the positive and negative criteria, as we'll talk about in a minute, for the variance relief. The RLUIPA law would in essence take precedent, and that's why it's really important, and that's why I'm in essence leading with this brief discussion, that you have that in the back of your mind with regard to this particular application, and to ensure in your thought process as you're looking at these variances and the relief sought by the applicant, that there is a federal law that if it was determined by a court ultimately that the board violated that law, then that would presumably take precedence, if there was such a violation that was determined, over any variance analysis, so to speak. Keep in mind also that the RLUIPA law, as I stated, was enacted in the year 2000, and it was prior to the current applicant's 2001 application for the D3 conditional use approval and the site plan approval for the house of worship that Mr. Levine talked about. And before I leave RLUIPA, I just have to remind the board that when you're looking at a development application, some courts, in looking at the RLUIPA laws vis-a-vis how a land use board reviews a particular application, have stated that the municipality, or the board in this case, simply can't, for example, and I'm just using it by way of example, point to an increase in traffic safety in the abstract as a compelling governmental interest, justifying, in essence, an alleged substantial burden on religious exercise. So in other words, the board in this case would need to and should, if in analyzing any element of the application, if you were determining in essence that the applicant did not meet the burden, one of the things you might want to look at is whether the board in essence has a compelling interest, or the government board has a compelling interest in achieving that interest through the particular restriction at issue, whether it's safety or otherwise, and what specifically, in essence, is the problem, and whether there's another way that the government could achieve the same compelling interest that would impose a lesser burden on religious exercise that the government, in this case the board, would be wise to at least consider whether that's a possibility rather than the more burdensome option. So that's all I'm going to say about RLUIPA. I believe I've said enough for now. So this application is a form of a use variance application. It's
Sorry, Rob, how do you spell that?
How do I spell what?
RLUIPA?
It's an acronym, RLUIPA.
An acronym for what?
Religious Land Use Institutionalized Persons Act, I believe.
Thank you.
So we have a form of a D variance, a variance under 40:55D-70D3, conditional use variance, as well as preliminary and final site plan approval, as well as non-D3 variances or bulk variances that this board is typically familiar with. I will remind the board right up front that because this is a D variance, it requires 5 affirmative votes from this board. So the applicant would in essence need to have at least 5 of the 7 votes to gain approval on the application. But before we get to that, as Mr. Levine again teed up, there is a threshold issue before this board as to whether the doctrine of res judicata and collateral estoppel should apply to this application. And as I previously instructed this board when the issue first arose, whether or not the doctrine of res judicata, res judicata, which is claim preclusion, is applicable or not to this board, it's been held that a board of adjustment can make that determination and should make that determination in the first instance. And again, the question is whether the same parties or their predecessors have previously sought the same relief from the Board of Adjustment in the same factual setting. And if this board determines that it's the same relief in the same factual setting, the case may be dismissed on the grounds that the case has already been decided. Now, again, to remind the board, an issue was raised early on as to whether this board, based on the proffer provided by the applicant and the applicant's witnesses, I believe it was Mr. Lanzafama and Mr. McDonough, as to why res judicata did not apply, a determination at the time was made by the board that it wanted to wait until all the evidence was in from all parties before addressing the issue of res judicata, so that the board would have a thorough record from which it could make a determination on the issue of res judicata. So what are the elements of res judicata? They are that the second application is substantially similar to the first, doesn't have to be exactly similar. Number 2, that the same parties or those that they're in privity with are involved. Number 3, that there must be no substantial change in the application itself or in the conditions surrounding the property. And Mr. Levine alluded to that, I believe, a little bit earlier this evening. Number 4, there must have been an adjudication on the merits in the first case, and number 5, both applications involve the same in essence, subject matter. So the board in this case, or the applicant in this case, I believe, would not object to a finding that it's certainly the same parties or their privities that are involved in this case the second time around, if not the third time around, 1994, 2001, 2002, and now we're at 2022. I think the issue is there a substantial change in the application? Or is there a substantial change in the conditions surrounding the property? So unlike a use variance application that requires 5 affirmative votes, I do not believe that a determination on the issue of res judicata, one way or another, requires 5 affirmative votes. I believe a majority vote would control for purposes of certainly of whether res judicata applies or not. And you heard Mr. Levine talk also about collateral estoppel. So collateral estoppel is in essence sort of a branch or a subpart of res judicata, which bars a redo of any particular issue which was actually determined in a prior action. And there's similar elements. The issue is actually determined in the prior proceeding. There was a final judgment or a final determination that the determination of the issue is essential to that determination. And again, the party against whom the doctrine is asserted was a party to or in privity with the party in the earlier proceeding. So, while collateral estoppel is distinguishable from res judicata because it bars a redo of a particular issue as opposed to a full claim, I've always seen and applied the doctrine in essence of one of res judicata just because of the nature of land use proceedings, because it's very difficult to sort of parse out particular issues in the board's determination in a prior action, in essence. So under the circumstances here, I think the first thing for the board to do is to determine whether the changes in the application, particularly from 2001, 2002, are substantial or not. And I will tell you that the case law talks about the fact that there can be an increase, let's say, in a front yard setback from 20 feet to 30 feet, and a decrease in a building coverage, let's say from 18% to 12%, and that's constituted a substantial change over a prior application, over a prior proposal, excuse me. And there's another case that talks about the fact that if you have a deviation that's being reduced, let's say it's a 32-foot deviation, and now it's only a 28-foot deviation. And in that particular case, there was elimination of a building coverage variance and impervious coverage variance due to a lot line adjustment. That constituted a substantial change. So it doesn't take much to constitute a substantial change. However, where greater relief is requested in the second application, it may be barred by the doctrine of res judicata. For example, if the second application proposes a more intense use, like if the building is getting larger and there's more parking or different types of parking facilities, reduction in a buffer, that can result in an application being barred by the doctrine of res judicata. But conversely, of course, where the application, the second application, seeks relief which is entirely different and of lesser proportions than the first application, then typically res judicata would not be applicable. So here, what do we have? We have testimony of the changes in the current site plan before the board as compared to the 2001 site plan. And as we all know, from the resolution and the plans from 2001, 2002 that were provided by the applicant, the original application was to create a house of worship within a residence, like 3,500 square foot building. And the current applications for a house of worship only, as Mr. Levine stated, no more residential use being proposed, with structures being demolished, 2 structures on the property, where the new building is going to contain about 6,000 square feet on the first and second floors, plus 4,000 and change square feet in the basement area. The driveway, I believe, Millburn Avenue is maybe a little closer to Bodwell Terrace, maybe 120 feet to now 80 feet. There's a difference in the number of parking spaces. There's a difference in the number of parking space deviation from the prior application. Mr. Lanzafama talked about and Mr. Levine talked about it as well, about the front yard setback for Millburn Avenue has been increased by over 20 feet, whereas the front yard setback on Bodwell is basically the same. I think Mr. Levine stated earlier, 39.16 feet versus currently being proposed at 40 feet. And there's some differences in the side yard setbacks. It's all in the record. There's a difference in the buffer to the residential zone. I believe it's now 7.9 feet, where originally in 2001, 2002, it was proposed at 17 feet. The prior application had 45 seats proposed. The current application has 135 seats. There was testimony about an increase in the number of dry wells, et cetera. So in summary, no prior variances in terms of the number of variances that the applicant sought relief from were being eliminated. I think there's 4 new variances that are being requested. So we heard the board heard testimony also from Mr. McDonough about changes to the surrounding area since the 2001 application, including that a mausoleum was constructed on the lot adjacent to the property. Talked about Millburn Avenue expansions. I think he talked about the former Wells Fargo site on Millburn Avenue was recently approved to be developed with a number of residential units, and the former Chanticleer was also redeveloped with 30 some odd townhomes. And I think he also talked about the former Saks Fifth Avenue site down Millburn Avenue, although partly located or mostly located in Springfield. So those are the issues with regard to res judicata collateral estoppel. So
Can I ask a question or two, Rob?
Yep.
I just want to understand a little better. When you talk about conditions surrounding the property, now that could be conditions immediately surrounding the property, like across the street from the property, or it could be the conditions that you sort of listed, development at Wells Fargo, the old Saks Fifth Avenue development. It could be either or both of those. Is that right?
it could be either or both. It's changed circumstances in the surrounding area.
Okay.
So I think the simplest example is that if a McDonald's, and this might be a silly example, but I'm going to make my point. If a McDonald's was being proposed in a residential zone and the application was denied, and then over a period of 30 years, the neighborhood completely changed. The zoning changed. Most of the residences were demolished, and the zoning changed to a commercial use. and most of the residences were demolished in favor of retail and commercial uses, then the fast food applicant, who maybe came back with a different application, although a fast food application, would probably be able to successfully point to changes in the surrounding area, even if the application were almost exactly the same, to say that res judicata does not apply now because this is a different surrounding area. So the argument would go that under the negative criteria, in terms of the applicant needing to demonstrate that there's no substantial detriment to the surrounding neighborhood or to the public good, well, that surrounding neighborhood or public good has changed.
Right.
And so that's why that application would not run afoul of res judicata and presumably would be allowed to be reviewed on its merits by the board.
Okay, thank you.
So I think this board has heard testimony from the applicant with regard to the issue of res judicata collateral estoppel. I believe that, again, it doesn't require a 5-person vote. I believe it's a simple majority vote one way or another. And my recommendation would be for the board to initially deliberate and then vote on the issue of res judicata. And the reason why I'm making that recommendation is that if the board determines that res judicata applies, and there hasn't been a substantial change in the application of the surrounding area, that this board could determine that it has no more to do with regard to this application if the board determined that res judicata did apply. Certainly, if the board votes and determines that res judicata does not apply, this board will then proceed to deliberate on the merits of the application, which I'm going to get to, certainly in a moment. So I just wanted to, again, make the board aware that my recommendation would be to first deliberate and vote on res judicata, and then assuming that, well, I shouldn't say assuming, if the board determines that res judicata does apply, then my advice would be that it would be up to, that you can ask the applicant whether the applicant would be want you to deliberate on the underlying merits so that there's a complete record or not. If the board, of course, determines that there's no res judicata, you would move on and deliberate and vote on the underlying application. So let me talk for you for a minute about the underlying application, if not more than a minute. So we know what this application, the board knows what the application is about and what the relief is required. And I believe that through the testimony presented by the applicant, including the summation provided by Mr. Levine today, talked about the various relief that is required by the application. First of all, that there's some conditional use variances that are required, whether it's minimum lot area, front yard setback to both Millburn Avenue, Bodwell Terrace, buffer to a residential use or residential zone, and parking setback. There are also variances, C variances, whether it's permitted steep slope disturbance, number of parking spaces. I think there also was an exception with regard to exceeding the average foot candle permitted. So that's what's before you, plus preliminary and final site plan approval. So I will remind you a couple of things with regard to conditional uses, with regard to inherently beneficial uses. So first of all, as Mr. Levine stated, and I don't believe it can be disputed, that a house of worship is considered to be an inherently beneficial use. So while the Coventry Square case talks about the standards for a conditional use variance under 40:55D-70D3, where the court talked about the fact that a conditional use is suitable to a zoning district, but not necessarily every location within the zoning, within that particular zoning district. And the question is whether the inability to comply with some of the conditions materially affect the appropriateness of the site for the conditional use. And of course, normally you would need to satisfy, as in this case, the positive and negative criteria, including special reasons for the positive criteria and the negative criteria, which would include enhanced quality of proof. But if you have an inherently beneficial use like we have here, the applicant's burden of proof is certainly lessened because the inherently beneficial use is presumed to satisfy the positive criteria. And in addition to which, with regard to the negative criteria, the applicant would not need to demonstrate and does not need to demonstrate here satisfaction based on what's called an enhanced quality of proof under the Medici standard. Instead, what the applicant is required to do is to, for the negative criteria, and it's noted that even under the municipal land use law, it does state that even for an inherently beneficial use, an applicant needs to meet the negative criteria, the two prongs of the negative criteria. But what the cases talk about, particularly Sika case, that the board is required to engage in a balancing test, in essence, a balancing of the positive and negative criteria. And there's 4 prongs of that balancing test. Prong number 1, the board identifies the public interest that's at stake here, and some uses certainly are more compelling than others, but that's the first thing that the board needs to do in terms of identification of what is the public interest that is being proposed here. Second of the 4 prongs, the board is then to identify the detrimental effects, if any, that will ensue from the granting of the variances. And there could be, almost anything, traffic, noise, could be, any element of any type of site plan application may be in play. That's up to the board to certainly determine. And then, certainly if those elements are minimal, typically they would not outweigh the inherently beneficial use that satisfy the positive criteria. The third element is that in some situations, the board may try to reduce any perceived detrimental effect by imposing reasonable conditions on that use. And if they do that, then the weight accorded to the adverse effect is reduced by the anticipated effect of those restrictions or conditions. And then fourth, the board is to weigh the positive and negative criteria to determine whether on balance, the grant of the variance would cause a substantial detriment to the public good or substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. Now, what's interesting here, that because we're dealing with a conditional use, I think that what the board's focus should really be is on an evaluation of the impact of the deviation. So you have to keep in mind that the house of worship use is conditionally permitted in the zone. And because of that, what the focus should be on basically both prongs of the negative criteria in analyzing the Sika balancing test is on the impact of the conditional use deviation, not necessarily the impact of the use itself, and whether conditions can be imposed on an approval to ensure that those deviations would not cause substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of the zoning plan or the surrounding area. And also for the board to keep in mind that with regard to the bulk variances, certainly you're familiar with the fact that you can, analyze them either under C1 or under C2 with regard to the relief that the applicant is seeking. The board, of course, needs to keep in mind that it's the applicant's burden of proof at all times to meet the positive and negative criteria for the variance relief requested of the board, as well as for preliminary and final site plan approval. And I think those are my comments at this point, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Rob? Any questions from anyone on the board? So as Mr. Simon stated here, I'm sorry.
Wolfgang, you have a question?
So can I just
Go ahead.
ask one clarification, going back a little earlier in your review, Rob, is when it comes down to determining, the factual settings and what's being requested prior, what was the, comparing one application to the previous, that generally not much of a change is often required if variances are being eliminated. So on the amelioration side, it doesn't necessarily take much of a change in order to count as a substantial change, thereby no res judicata. But in the instances where, or in an instance, if an application involves a more intense usage or additional variances as compared to the previous, then that is more likely to be deemed, or to be reasonably deemed res judicata.
I think, Wolfgang, that if you're looking at, and let me clarify something. If an applicant is not eliminating any variances, but is reducing the detrimental impact, the detrimental impact or the concern, let's say, of the board from the first application, the courts have found res judicata to not apply, right? But there is in case law that talks about that if there's been an intensity or increase, and unfortunately, there are not that many, when I say unfortunately, in terms of the board's guidance, there are not that many cases where an applicant has come in the second time with a more, intense use. And that's probably, because they already know that the applicant, that the board was in essence not finding in favor of the prior application, and then probably wanted to do something to make it a little bit more appealing, in essence. So if you have it in, if you go from, hey, right now I have a 10-foot setback, and I'm going to come back with the same application, but I'm actually going to make it a 5-foot setback. I would say, and that's the only deviation, then that would probably be res judicata, because it would be essentially the same.
Essentially the same, and not alleviating, but exacerbating.
Right. And but at the same time, I don't think the applicant can go from a 10-foot setback and now say, okay, now I'm going to a 0-foot setback, but I don't want res judicata to apply because I'm making a substantial change.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Hey, Rob. I just want to go back to the your opening comments on that 2000 Act, the Religious Land Use Act that you cited. So I've been on this board over 10 years. I've actually never never had an instance where that would be brought into consideration. So hence, I've never actually heard of it before. I certainly haven't read it or studied it. I may have looked at it at some point during my orientation on land use. When I came on the board, perhaps other newer members may have read on that before, but it's not something that I'm particularly well versed in. Now, having said that, I view it as a recourse to the applicant for appeal. So if this board does something in its normal course of action, unintended to be in any way malice, the applicant can appeal based on this 2000 act. Is that right?
Yes, in fact, as part of this application, and the reason why this board, doesn't need to and shouldn't be ruling on whether, there's a RLUIPA violation, not a RLUIPA violation. That's not for this board.
Right.
In fact, the applicant, as part of their submission, my recollection is they included a letter from a lawyer in Washington, D.C. to Rabbi Bogomilsky, in which the lawyer opined in his letter, I think it was a he, that should the board deny the application, that denial would constitute a RLUIPA violation. So that was part of the record that the applicant submitted and included it, as part of the application package. And so that is why, in particular, plus Mr. McDonough, during his testimony, I recall, raised the issue. And that is why I felt it was appropriate to remind the board and bring it to the board's attention.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? So we'll first start with deliberations regarding res judicata collateral estoppel. And so, board members, any thoughts?
So I'll go.
Sure.
So from my perspective, I think that res judicata does apply here, and I'll take you through my reasoning as to the points outlined by our attorney. So clearly, it's the same party. Yes. The first case was adjudicated. Yes. It is substantially the same matter. Now, the word matter, of course, is broad, but we're talking about a synagogue on the site. So from my perspective, it's essentially the same matter. And then that brings us to the point of conditions surrounding the property. So let's talk about that. So from my perspective, conditions surrounding the property are in fact the conditions surrounding the property. And this, in my view, has to do with the neighbors on the adjoining street. They voiced very much the same concerns and objections as were voiced last time in the last hearing. So from my perspective, the conditions surrounding the property have not materially changed. The view of the neighbors, and what maybe we could call them objectors, surrounding the property has not materially changed. And so I haven't seen a material change based on those 4 points. And that's why I think that this case has already been settled. And I welcome other board member opinions or views.
So I'm going to jump in next. I think this is a quintessential example of res judicata collateral estoppel. For what Steve mentioned, but to take it one step further, we look at not only what was applied for in the previous application in 2001, deliberated in 2002. But whether or not these conditions have been exacerbated in this second bite of the apple, and we look at the buffers, they're significantly reduced. We look at the parking, and that is intensified in this application, and the deviation is intensified. We went from a 3,500 square foot modification of a building to a 10,000 square foot building, which by all measures is going to increase the intensity of use on that site. So I think that this is a perfect example of res judicata.
Craig, I'll jump in here. I think what you just said really hits the nail on the head with this one, where we're exacerbating a lot of the issues that we're seeing in the earlier application. We're making them, the conditions even worse. And I think that's what it comes down to for me to feel that this is absolutely an instance of res judicata where it can be applied.
Thank you, Jessica. Any other thoughts?
So we've identified that the parking has been, the parking, vis-a-vis the original, the previous application, the parking is being intensified. The buffer request is intensified. It's not a conversion of a building, it's a complete tear down of existing structures and the building of a new one. In terms of size of in terms of the size and the seating capacity, I'm looking through the documents. And I think, am I incorrect that they were looking for typical physical capacity of around 50 to 60 people, and this would be for like 136?
Correct. 65 to 70 was the original application, now going to 136.
Okay. That's what I thought. Yeah, it seems like, I mean, it's hard to get around the fact that this seems like, substantially similar. In fact, it seems like just overall, just a much bigger, a grander ask than what came around, previously. And based on, the guidance we've been given and our understanding, or my understanding anyways, of res judicata, this would seem to fit that.
Thank you for your comments, Wolfgang. Anyone else?
I mean, I would just concur with what's already been said. We're looking for a conditional use for a house of worship in a residential zone, which is what was sought previously. You've made the points about a number of the variants being requested, being exacerbated. There's been no decrease in the number of variances. And the size and scale of what's being proposed much larger, and many of the other aspects, the lighting, the parking, et cetera, all of those things are substantially what those issues were previously. So I would agree with you all as well. And I guess I would just add that Mr. Simon made the point earlier about the RELUPA law, which was in 2000. So it was prior, to the 2001 application, it was already in place. So, if there was any thinking around that point as well, it was also part of the consideration previously.
Thank you, Amy. Jody?
I concur with all the fellow board members as well. And it might be a different composition of the board, but this very similar application, all the three criteria that Mr. Simon mentioned, this is perfectly fitting that all the criteria are indicating that this is a clear example of res judicata.
Thank you, Jody. So in that case, is there a motion regarding res judicata?
Can I just, before we take that vote, Craig,
Sure.
We lost Joe for a little while Rob was talking, maybe 5 minutes. So I want to just be clear as to when we take the vote.
Now, Joe, I know you have a thorough understanding as a law professor of res judicata collateral estoppel, but I did see that you dropped off for a minute or two. Are you comfortable voting in this case?
Yes.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
You might want to ask Mr. Levine, the applicant's attorney, as to his position on that. I was unaware that Mr. Steinberg. I
Yeah, you
couldn't
dropped
see.
off for a minute or two. Mr. Levine, are you comfortable with Mr. Steinberg voting in this case? Or would
Yeah,
you
I have no
prefer an
issue.
alternate to take charge?
Is there an alternate available?
Yes, there
Yes,
is.
we do.
If there's an alternate available that was here for the entire summation that Mr. Simon offered, I think that would be my preference, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Then Ashley, you'll be voting in this case.
And just to confirm, Ashley, you've been present for the entirety of the application.
And yeah, she has.
Yeah.
No, But I mean,
I had missed the last meeting, but I watched it and I had that form.
And I have her affidavit
It's Eileen.
in the file. So she doesn't-
Mr. Levine, is that acceptable?
It is. Thank you, Mr. Simon.
I have a question just because I didn't find it before, I didn't find it now. RLUIPA was enacted in the year before the prior application, but was RLUIPA actually referenced or mentioned in that prior application?
My recollection is that it was not
I didn't see-
mentioned in the resolution.
Yeah, and I didn't see it mentioned anywhere in the resolution or any of the text at all. So I just found that a little interesting that if it was enacted in 2000, it must have been certainly, a potential issue, but it wasn't even, doesn't seem to have gotten any attention for whatever reason.
Okay. As mentioned, is there a motion regarding res judicata collateral estoppel?
I would make the motion. I'm not quite sure how to phrase it. If we're like, Rob, I'd look for your guidance as to if I'm motioning that res judicata applies in this situation. I don't know exactly how to phrase it.
If you're inclined to make that motion, I believe the motion would be you move that res judicata applies to this application and that accordingly the application should be dismissed on legal grounds.
Okay. So I move that the doctrine of res judicata applies to this current application and it should therefore be dismissed on those legal grounds.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
That was Wolfgang.
Yes.
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Jyoti Sharma,
Yes.
Steve Toger,
Yes.
Wolfgang Tutoris,
Yes.
Ashley Abingdor,
Yes.
Jessica Glatt,
Yes.
Craig Plaitner.
Yes. So, Mr. Lenine, as Mr. Simon alluded to, would you like us to deliberate on the case in its remaining capacity?
Yeah, I think in light of the time and effort that we devoted to putting on the case and the time and effort that the board spent listening to it, to the testimony, I would like to request that deliberation and vote as well, please.
Very well.
And this does not impact the prior motion, but rather so the board has provided a complete record with regard to this application.
So there will be no subsequent voting.
Well,
Correct,
Mr.
Rob.
Levine, Mr. Levine, do you have a position on that?
Well, I think if there's going to be deliberation and evaluation of the testimony, there should probably be a vote.
Very well.
I don't see why we would vote on a case that we've already decided is dismissed.
I would agree.
It's more for
That's
a
a-
complete record.
I'm happy to debate the issues of the application. I would abstain from a vote personally.
What are the implications of voting or not voting as per any future?
It's the reason why the board would proceed to, even though the case is dismissed, is so that the board, or I'm sorry, that Mr. Levine has a complete record with which to do as his client desires. So if this matter does end up getting appealed, that, and it's determined that the board was incorrect as to res judicata, that normally under those circumstances, the court would presumably remand the case back to the board for a new proceeding.
Mhm.
And I believe, and Mr. Levine can speak to this probably better than I can, because it's his client, that having a complete record and a full deliberation, if it's determined that the court finds that, for example, if res judicata does not apply, that the court can then analyze what the board did on a full record.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Simon as to that. I think that possibility would exist. And also, quite honestly, one of the complaints that a lot of the residents had as they came out to all of our hearings was, it's dragging on. I have to give up my time with my family. I have to sit through these hearings and these hours of testimony. And they expressed a great deal of frustration as to that, understandably so. So if there were an appeal, and if the court were to determine that the board's application of res judicata was an error in this instance, we would be in a situation where this applicant might well have to go back before the board and retrace all of the same testimony and recreate the same record at the expense of the board's time, the applicant's time and money, and as well as the frustration of the neighbors.
So I have a question for Rob then. I mean, what are the implications of voting versus not voting as to any future proceeding?
Well, certainly, for example, if the board, I'll do it both ways. If the court finds that the board was correct in determining the issue of res judicata, then there would be nothing for the court to need to further review, presumably. If it's determined that the board got the issue of res judicata wrong, then the court would turn to the analysis of the underlying case. So if the board then deliberated and voted and determined that the applicant, met its burden of proof, then that would be certainly part of the record for the court to look at. If the court finds that the board got the issue of res judicata wrong, but then reviewed the underlying deliberation and vote on the merits of the variance relief being sought, and said, for example, if the board denied the application, well, was the board's denial, was it arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable? Did it violate RLUIPA, et cetera, et cetera?
So it does have implications as to.
It would, and I would not recommend that the board deliberate just for the sake of deliberating. The board could also determine that it chooses not to deliberate and vote on the underlying merits of the case. It's up to the board.
So I guess we'll take that first. Is anyone uncomfortable deliberating on the merits of the case?
It's not about being uncomfortable. It's about it's about, I mean, we're almost talking about scenario analysis now, right? I mean, we're talking hypotheticals now. We don't know what a appellate court will do. We don't know that if an appellate court overturns our decision, that they might require the applicant to represent the case anyway. We may have to hear this whole case all over again. There's so many different scenarios that we don't know what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. What we do know is that we have decided that this case is dismissed. We do know that we've done. So
Right.
we should, move forward on that.
What exactly is the principle that underpins this next decision here? And is it just, I'm sure that the applicant would love to have a complete record, and maybe even members of the public might as well. I don't know. But what exactly is the core responsibility of this board
Yeah, I do not believe that the board is obligated to proceed to deliberate and vote on the underlying variance and other relief that the applicant is requesting. They're under no legal obligation to do that. The question is, as I posed it earlier, as to whether there's a desire for purposes, and that's why I asked Mr. Levine what his position was, to have a complete record.
And Mr. Simon, if I may, just briefly elaborate on that, I think the answer is if we're somewhat uncomfortable with hypotheticals, but at least in terms of making this decision that's at hand, if there were to be an appeal, and if the court were to rule that the board was in error in applying res judicata, one thing's very clear: there would be no decision on the merits of the underlying case if the board refused to deliberate and vote on it. And if the applicant remained hopeful of getting a house of worship approved at this property, the board would, and the applicant would have no choice. And if the applicant chose to bring the application, the board would have no choice, and the neighbors would have no choice but to go through that entire process again. I'm not really necessarily seeing from the board standpoint what the drawback would be. All of the testimony has been offered, all the evidence has been submitted, it's all there. And if a court were to determine that res judicata was improperly applied, but had the benefit of the deliberation and vote on the underlying case, at least there's an opportunity that could be disposed of one way or another. So I don't know how the board.
So I'll say just one more thing, and then I'll. So what I was struggling with is that if I voted for res judicata application, which I did, and everyone else on the board did not, and we went forward, then I was struggling with, well, I've already in my mind decided that this case should be dismissed because it's the same as the last case, which was denied. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, those are the steps I've taken. Now I'm being asked to, so how would I deliberate it and not deny it, I guess is where I'm coming down on. I'll leave it now to the board to decide if we want to.
So remember, when we originally decided that we would not vote on res judicata from day one, was so that we could hear all the testimony,
right?
So that we were able to have a complete picture of what we're looking at. The res judicata vote still stood. We still were going to do that. It was just whether or not we were going to hear some compelling evidence or otherwise that changed our minds on whether or not res judicata applied.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a reason we listened to the entire testimony. Was that so you have a big picture? So if this board is uncomfortable moving forward with deliberation on the merits of what we've heard, then so be it.
My recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is to maybe take a vote just on whether the board desires to, in essence, deliberate and vote on the underlying application as is being requested by Mr. Levine under the circumstances.
Okay, so
Go ahead,
Joe?
Joe.
Let me just say this. First of all, even though I appeared to be out of the deliberations, I heard everything. I don't think that we should continue the vote here. I think that we've concluded that the case is dismissible based on res judicata grounds, meaning that the case has been heard already and that the law applies, continues to apply to the applicant's case. There's a different case that would be litigated if it was concluded that the court held that res judicata does not apply. That would, meaning, for example, I'll give you an example. The setback from the building to the nearest property line is significantly decreased in this instance if the applicant were to continue to go forward and build the building, the new building. That may be an insignificant fact except in this instance, but not an insignificant fact. If the case were to be retried on the basis of should the applicant be permitted to build this building, notwithstanding the fact that the 1992 and 2002 decisions did not settle the case. So therefore, it seems to me that it's a different case that would be litigated with very different emphases on different issues if we had a new litigation with the understanding that res judicata did not apply. For those reasons, I would be opposed to hearing the case now. I think the res judicata decision has been made by this board, and the court will tell us if it's appealed by the applicant, whether we did the right thing or the wrong thing. If we did the wrong thing, then let the applicant come back and let's litigate the case based on what they actually want to do, as opposed to whether this case has been heard and decided already. So I would be opposed to continuing the litigation at this point before the board.
Yeah, so if I'm-
When you say litigation, Joe, you mean continuing the
Deliberation.
application at this
Yeah,
point?
the application, yes.
Deliberations.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's kind of what I was trying to get to in my comments, was that if we were to give a complete deliberation and vote at this point, and vote on it at this point, and if res judicata were to be determined by a court of appeals that we got it wrong for whatever reason, and we deliberated and voted, then the whole matter could simply be decided in that one instance by that appellate court, and this board would have no more purview over it. In other words, to my mind, the way I'm understanding this, for us to deliberate and then vote, gives a lot of downside potentially to the board, or at least downside in terms of losing the power of being able to enforce zoning laws, zoning ordinances, and very little upside in terms of protecting those same duties. Rob, is that a correct way of viewing the situation?
I think that what the applicant is asking for is a deliberation and vote on the merits of the application that was brought before this board
Mhm.
in the event that a court determines that res judicata does not apply,
Right.
in which case you would deliberate and vote based on the record before this board, beginning on, I believe, February 7th, thereabouts,
Mhm.
when the application commenced,
Mhm.
and analyzing the record before this board, irrespective of what happened before the prior board.
Right. But if res judicata if our determination of res judicata is overturned by a court, does the matter then automatically come back to this board in some shape or form, or can the matter be in total decided by that court without coming back to this board? I'm viewing this through the lens of what is the what allows the board to maintain its ability to enforce zoning laws within the township.
Well, we don't enforce zoning laws.
We don't enforce in terms of determining whether whether a variances should be granted or not. Do we remove that ability to do that from ourselves if we were to deliberate and vote potentially?
Go ahead, Joe, and then I'll answer the question.
I think the answer that I would give to that question would be that you don't know whether the applicant is going to insist on going forward or not. So I would back off at this point. We've made the decision that res judicata applies to the case. That's the end of it. If the applicant wishes to come back before the board and make an argument that, okay, you did not decide this case in 1992 and 2002, you've got to decide it now. Let them tell us why it should be decided in their favor now.
Okay, so you're boiling it down to a more fundamental principle, and you're not going very far down to this, very far down
Right.
the decision tree.
Let me try to answer the question, which is that I think the applicant can do whatever the applicant wants to do. They could ask for that the determination of the board on res judicata be overturned. They can ask for an approval by the court. They could ask for it to be remanded. That's up to the applicant.
Okay, so that kind of those explanations simplify the decision-making process.
With that, I would like a vote then on whether or not we would do this, as we do have this request on the table. So in that case, basically, we'll do a quick roll call.
So let's just
apologize.
determine, wait, before we
Is there
do
a
that.
precedent for this kind of vote? Is this?
Yeah, you can, first of all, I just want to know who's going to be eligible for voting on this.
Same people that just voted.
Right. So Joe would not be voting on this.
No.
I think the board, Steve, is allowed to take procedural votes like it's being proposed right here. I think it's completely appropriate.
Okay.
So in that case, like I said, I'd rather do it, like I said, in a roll call rather than a
Well,
show of hands.
well, why doesn't somebody make a motion one way or another? And
Right. So,
So I move that we vote on whether or not to proceed with deliberations and a vote.
well, but I would recommend that you do it either
in the positive or the negative.
affirmative or negative.
So
One or the other.
I'll make a motion that we do not continue to deliberate and that we do not vote on this application. That's my motion.
Okay, so if an affirmative answer would be that you do not want to vote or deliberate further. Okay.
I need a
No
second.
deliberation and no voting, not one or the other, but neither is what we said.
Correct. An
And I
affirmative
second-
action is that we stop and the res judicata is where it ends.
Okay, I second that then.
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Jody Sharma,
Yes.
Steve Toger,
Yes.
Wolfgang Tutores,
Yes,
Ashley Abingdor,
Yes.
Jessica Glad,
Yes.
Craig Plattner.
No. So we will be moving on to our next case.
I'm so confused.
Thank you, Mr. Levine.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good evening. Calendar 389222, Guido and Miriam Sotowski. This has been carried since December 5th. Good evening, Mr. Duvenet. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, guys.
Good. Is your applicant? Yes, there is. Okay. Good evening, all. So you're all previously sworn at our prior couple of meetings, so please proceed with whoever would like to speak first.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We will be brief. So after our previous couple of meetings, obviously we've had the opportunity to review significant feedback. As we alluded to in our previous presentation, we had the opportunity to really focus on the need versus the want in our presentation, primarily, as we previously mentioned, access to storage, access to a bathroom, given the location of bathrooms within the home. And again, after feedback from the last meeting, we were able to shrink the structure, I think relatively significantly, certainly significantly from the first application. And we proposed something that meets our needs and we hope is respectful and mindful of the precedent set by such variances. We should also note that the structure, we've made some revisions that hopefully are aesthetically pleasing. And we should note that, the structure, while the original application was not visible from the street, primarily from neighboring residents, I just wanted to remind the board that we had the opportunity to brief our neighbors on the original application, and this one, which is obviously much smaller than the original structure, eliminated the outdoor space, really brought down the roof line. And I just wanted to say before turning it over to Danny Duvernay to get into specifics, that we do appreciate your feedback, and hopefully the board is receptive to the revised application that we've made that will solve a bit of an access issue for us. And with that, Danny, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. So let me jump into it and share screen and show you the big bite out of the apple. Final bite, I hope. for sure. So we share screen, and thank you for
So-
allowing us to do all that.
Right.
So,
So Mr. Dubonnet, are these,
yes,
so you're up to A5 and I see your clairvoyance and marked them already?
yes, we're up to A5, and this is similar to what you have in your package.
And
Just,
you acknowledge that you continue to be sworn.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the bite, hopefully the final bite is such. So originally we had 3 variances. We eliminated accessory use coverage completely the last time, but now we're talking about, and I apologize, there's so many thoughts here, but to work you through the thoughts, basically building coverage, we are down to, or we are over by 298. So it's a 7% deviation from what's allowed, and we are 155 square feet less than when we originally proposed. So we again looked at, okay, let's make a space and let's tight as we possibly can. So building coverage is down to 298 over what's allowed. Lot coverage is also significantly lower. So now we are 362 square feet over what's allowed, and it's a deviation of 3.4%. And we are 823 square feet than our original application. So we're in a place where we would still love to have what we're presenting, but happy that we get to this place. And let me show you really quickly some of the changes we did, because obviously we reduced the square footage by introducing some additional landscaping, which, although we don't need, it still softens the structure. I've lowered the height of the structure and the roof lines of the structure. So let me share with you what you don't have, which is our latest rendering. So we eliminated the gable roof that used to face the front. Now it's like a hip roof, so less vertical siding and a smaller looking. The roof line's got another foot lower. So we're well under the accessory use height. We're well within the acceptable limits of where you could put accessory use structure, setback wise. And we've opted for a slightly variant in the color. So if we go with a grayish tone to the structure, that helps. Believe it or not, the white makes it look larger. So now with a darker color, darker windows, we feel like it appears smaller. And then with some modest landscaping in front of it and on the sides of it, I think it just kind of nestles better into the site plan. So that's really our application. So we've reduced the building a lot and height and visibility, overall architectural character.
So Danny, if I might just add, so again, given the comments from the board with respect to the size of the structure, we really focused the design of this structure in the rear yard around, again, primarily the bathroom, which, as we mentioned in previous meetings, is not readily accessible from our rear yard. You have to walk through a family room or a kitchen, or in actually some cases a bedroom, to access a bathroom to the house, which, as you can imagine, we found this past summer was a little bit challenged with young children who have a tendency to slip through the house. So, what we did was tried to create a structure that, while not feeling like, for lack of a better way to put it, an outhouse, which is solely a single freestanding bathroom, but again, we did significantly reduce the size of the structure to have a small sitting area and kitchenette with a bathroom and storage. So to Danny's point, that is our presentation. We do appreciate your time, and we are hopeful that the board can look positively upon this application.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr.
Any
Chairman,
questions?
Can I
I'm sorry,
ask
go
a
ahead,
question
Rob.
here? Yeah. So, Mr. Dubonnet, with regard to the variances, so for lot coverage, 35% is the max permitted, correct?
Yes,
And what is being proposed?
thank you. Being proposed is 36.2%.
Okay, so that's your lot coverage variance.
Yes,
And what about for building coverage? There's 14%, if I recall, max permitted. What is being proposed?
proposed is 14.9%.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board for Mr. Duvenet or Mr. Sabatowski? I see none. Any questions from the audience? Any comments from the audience regarding this application? I see none. So I'll close the public portion of this hearing. Board members, what say you?
I think the applicant really took to heart what we had to say, and made some really pretty substantial changes to appease us, to appease our concerns. And I think it's not only that that they because I mean anyone could start with an application asking for the world and then kind of whittling it down. But I do feel that the changes that were made and the reduction in some of these, overages, are enough that I think that, we're being left with an application that I would feel comfortable approving.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. Go ahead, Wolfgang.
I would largely echo what Jessica just said. They've come down from building coverage of 15.5% down to 14.9%, which is a pretty small deviation from the 14% baseline or the 40% guidelines or variance as it's stated. Lot coverage is down from 38.9 to 36.2, which is a small increase over the 35% given by the ordinance. And the efforts they've gone to, I think this is a very modest, it certainly is a reasonable thing to have on a pool. It's a reasonable accessory to include, and I think it's been well designed, and I would support this.
So I'm going to jump in next here. While I appreciate the reduction in size, I'm still struggling here as according to municipal land use law under C1 or C2 variance. So C1, I think we've ruled out as there is no blatant hardship here. But even from a C2 perspective, it still comes into the fact that we have a 29,976 square foot lot where 20,000 is required. We actually have an oversized lot. If we were in the R3, it's still oversized. So to me, this is a real great example of overdevelopment. And we have a new home that lawfully exists. We have a pool that lawfully exists, an associate patio that lawfully exists. But now to develop this lot further with another accessory structure is a little grandiose. And I just struggle under C2 as to how this is beneficial for the zoning code. Like I said, while I appreciate the reduction in size, I myself am struggling with how it fits under the criteria. Any other thoughts?
I'll just add, Craig, that I echo your thoughts on the application. It's a very extensively developed piece of property. It's oversized. It's difficult to see how it fits either of the criteria.
Anyone else?
I'd love to hear from more board members who haven't spoken.
Me too.
I think it would be beneficial.
Just to clarify, this application was first heard on October 17th. Amy, Jody, and Chandra were all absent on that day. So Joe, Steve, Wolfgang, Ashley, Jessica, Craig, you are the voting members on this. Just wanted to bring everyone up to speed on that.
Sure.
I'll go now, Craig. Though I do appreciate all the efforts that applicants has gone to decrease the mass and change the roof line, I guess I'm echoing more your line of thought, Craig, that I just still don't see the benefit, and I'm still not comfortable with the deviations in the building coverage and the lot coverage here. So I wouldn't support the application.
Thank you, Ashley. Anyone else? Any thoughts?
I would agree with you, Craig.
Thank you, Joe.
Could I
Okay.
just ask one question? Can someone just refresh my memory? Was this house built by the applicant or?
It was built by the architect, but it wasn't built by the applicant.
If I may, thank you. If I may, this is the applicant. No, yes, the home was built by the architect, but no, the home was not built by myself and my wife, the applicant. So obviously, while we love the home and we love you, Danny, you know, we face an issue of access primarily in that we don't have the ability within the home itself to access a couple of those key components. Again, namely, direct access to a bathroom or any kind of storage without building some sort of structure in the rear yard to allow us access to the two. The only way we can get to a bathroom is, again, walking through the front of the house into the family room and into a powder room, or through a bedroom. So that, that has driven the the bulk of the I don't want to say hardship, but the issue. So I'm not sure how to alleviate that issue for us without building some sort of additional structure. And again, we have the same issue, with respect to storage. While we were fortunately able to build a pool and patio as of right, both on lot coverage and of course building coverage, we weren't able to do so with respect to any kind of accessory structure to alleviate that issue. So forgive me for speaking extensively, but yeah, that's the primary issue that we face, which isn't something that we're able to deal with within the home itself. So I'm not sure exactly of the solve there. Obviously we're respectful and mindful of the comments of the board, and that's why we've made the the revisions that we've made. But I'm not sure how to alleviate those items, again, without some sort of accessory or additional structure, regardless of where on the property it is.
So I would just, for what it's worth, I would say that I think that there actually is a hardship argument that could be made here for the applicant, especially in light of the fact that the applicant was not the one to be working with the architect, to design this house, and then coming before the board to ask for even more. That, yes, it's an oversized piece of property, but the house was constructed in such a way that it's not set up in a way on the property where people have the ability to easily have access to a bathroom. And I think, again, just for what it's worth, my opinion, this is a house that does have a lot of property. It's very, very private in the backyard, and I don't see it in the same way as being overdeveloped. So just my 2 cents.
So, excuse me, sir, the applicant, I think you just stated, I want to be clear, that you did put in the pool and you did put in the walkway along the pool. Is that right?
No, not the walkway, just patio around the pool. Not.
No, I'm sorry. So you put in the pool and you put in the patio around the pool.
I did, yes.
And I thought you said that when you did that at the time, you could not do the cabana. Is that right?
Not as of right without a variance, correct.
Right, so you went ahead and did it without the cabana.
Yes, at the
Now
time.
you've come back and asked for the cabana. So you didn't ask for the cabana when you did the pool and the patio around the pool. You did those separately, and now you're coming and asking. So my question is, why didn't you ask for the cabana when you were putting in the pool and the patio around the pool?
Thank you for your question. I wasn't seeking any variance at the time to build the pool. We were under a timing constraint with respect to availability of materials from our contractor. So we had to get in and construct the pool.
Folks, the public portion is closed, but you know, you could argue this all day long that, you know, you could have made the pool smaller too, right? So, you know, a lot of these hypotheticals really aren't on the table right now. We're right now trying to adjudicate
But
on.
not for building coverage, right? Because sorry.
So, you know, that's what we're dealing with right now. So based on the testimony that you heard and based on the decisions that you have to make, is there a motion in this case?
There's a motion as to whether we're.
No, stop.
Yeah.
This is to the board. Okay,
So I'll make a move. I'll make a motion to deny the application.
Do I have a second?
I would actually second that motion.
If you vote in the affirmative, you're voting to deny.
Joseph Steinberg,
No,
Steve Toger,
Yes.
Wolfgang Tutores,
Yes.
Ashley Abigdor,
Yes.
Jessica Glatt,
No.
Craig Plattner.
Yes.
Motion's denied.
Have a good evening, folks. We'll be moving on to our next case. Calendar 389922, which is 5 Chestnut Place, S. Byron and R. Matthews.
Okay, we're not doing the 30
Oh, we can do
Bleecker?
singular next. Do you want to do singular? Let's just.
I don't know. I thought that's.
yeah,
what we-
let.
All right, fine. Sorry about that. We're going to jump to calendar 390522, which is new singular wireless,
But I don't see,
which is 30 Bleecker Street.
I don't see anybody.
I think Miss Fairweather should be representing the applicant.
Is
Mr.
she there?
Chairman, I would like to recuse from this case, the singular case, if they were hearing that.
That's very well. That's fine.
So, hey, Eileen,
Yes,
why don't you have, if she has a conflict, she should maybe get off the panel and then we'll bring her back.
Okay.
Yeah,
on.
so we'll
Yep.
put you in the audience.
okay, hold on.
Good, thank you.
oh God.
Rob, who are you alluding to as
Who's
representing?
representing?
I believe that Judy
Oh, Judy.
Fairweather.
Oh, Judy, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
If you could please turn on your camera and microphone, please.
My camera, my microphone is on and my
There you
camera.
go. Oh,
Oh,
there
it
you were.
was for a moment.
there you go.
I'm going to recuse in this case.
Whoa, hold on a
Hold on.
second.
Hold on one second. Hold on a
I'm
second.
going to recuse as well.
Okay, Joe is recusing as well.
Joe, before you recuse, can I just say that I'm glad I'm here for your last meeting. I was in front of you as Judy Fairweather, Judy Babinski. I've been in front of you for years. I appreciate how well you treat applicants and how great you are with the attorneys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyway, okay.
Okay, so Joe, we're going to move you over into the panelist section, okay? So how would you like to proceed this evening?
I can proceed and make this very quick. A little introduction. We are doing minimal.
Eileen, could
Yep.
Oh, sorry, you could
I got
slide Jody over.
Judy, hold on a second, please.
There we go.
Okay, wait,
Please proceed.
so Jody the reason why I'm halting for a second is that this is technically a use variance application because the use is not permitted in the zone. We have 5, just to make sure we have at least 5 eligible members here, correct?
We have 7. Yeah,
Right.
we have 7. We have our
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon, for clearing that up.
Yeah,
Good evening. So we are proposing, AT&T is proposing replacing antennas on and upgrading and antennas on an existing pole at 90 feet, staying at 90 feet. Under federal law, even though your ordinance requires use variances and being before the board, we're asking for site plan waiver because of under federal law, section 6409, if the application is not substantial, then honestly municipalities have to approve the application, and the Federal Communication Commission did it just so the carriers can upgrade and keep up with the demands of the clients when there is no difference in really what's there. So I have my engineer, if you could please find Peter Smith. He is
Yep.
my engineer. Peter, are you?
Yeah, he's there.
He's there. I know he's there. He's been texting me back. We've been texting each other.
He's coming over.
Great. Peter, hi.
So, will Mr. Smith be testifying this evening as an engineer?
Yes, so he needs to raise his right hand.
Yep, and we'll qualify him.
Do you want to swear in before I qualify?
I'm going to swear him in right now.
Yeah.
Sir, do you swear from the testimony you're about to give tonight in these proceedings to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you would just state your name for the record, please.
Peter Smith.
Peter, can I have your educational and professional background, please?
My educational background, I have a bachelor's in architectural engineering. I've had that bachelor's, been a graduate engineer for 26 years. I've been a licensed professional engineer for 22 years.
And your license is in the state of New Jersey.
And yes, I'm active license in the state of New Jersey.
And you are
and I-
responsible for the plans before the board this evening?
Yes, yep, my signature is on there.
Okay.
And
So-
your license is in good standing, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, your qualifications are accepted from this board. Please proceed.
Okay, so Peter, just to hurry things up for the board, I'm just going to ask you questions to prove to the board that this is not a substantial change. You can answer yes or no, or if I'm too honed in on what I want you to say, please feel free to expand. But we are replacing 6 antennas with 9 antennas, correct?
Correct.
But the antennas we're replacing with them, even though there's 3 more, each of the antennas are shorter, so the length of the long panel antennas that we're replacing 2 with is about the same, correct?
Correct.
We're relocating a few antennas, but the mounts are already there, correct? So we're not adding new mounts, it's what was originally approved, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And we're relocating and adding a few radio heads,
Yes.
honestly? And are we expanding the compound, going outside the compound, or expanding any of the ground equipment?
No, we're not extending the height, the horizontal distance, the volume. We're not increasing the compound either. Any changes that happen on the ground happen inside the existing shelter.
And we submitted photo sims to the board, and in your professional opinion, looking at the photo sims as the engineer, is there really any difference between the before and after photo sims?
No, it's nearly indistinguishable.
And this will satisfy whatever our radio frequency requirements are for the FCC and be able to upgrade the site for our customers, correct?
Correct. The antennas are detailed actually on the CDs that were submitted, and they're all manufactured under the FCC regs.
Mr. Chair, it is that simple. Everything that Peter said, and I'm sure Mr. Simon will confirm, we comply with the federal rules, and we ask for a site plan waiver and that you grant the application so we can upgrade our site.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Smith from the board? Any questions for Mr. Smith from the audience?
Does the applicant know when the original tower was put up?
The original tower, no, I'm sorry, I don't.
Is it more than 10 years ago, do you think?
I would bet it is more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
I'm
ago,
looking here, yeah, it was a long time ago. We don't own the tower. But if you're getting to, and I don't know if you are, the stability of the tower, just so you know, and isn't it true, Peter, that we have to do a structural report and submit it for our building permit and to whoever owns the tower to show that the tower can handle the change, if any. I don't even know if there is a change in the weight.
1995.
Okay, thank you very much.
Long time.
Peter, you were supposed to say yes after what I said.
Yes, yes. Either an engineer's signed letter or an engineer's recalculation and calc submission pack has to be done after all changes. And the loads do change often. Code changes, equipment changes, etc.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Any other questions for Mr. Smith? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chandra.
So a couple of questions. What is driving this change? Number one, I think that's for Judy. Second is more technical one. You said from 6 to 9 antennas, that's the change, but it will go on existing mounts. Would you not need to put in more mounts to accommodate more antennas? Just question for Peter.
Okay, the reason for the change from singles to doubles is an advancement in technology, new frequencies sold by the FCC, licensed to AT&T and other carriers. And this is the new C-band frequency in addition to the other antennas DoD band. So each antenna represents its separate band, both licensed to AT&T. And those antennas can be and are substantially smaller. So they go in the exact same location and on the same mount. The antennas are backed up by a mount pipe, which is kind of the vertical piece that those strap to. And that is engineered to take that, wind load and ice load, whatever the code requires in this location. So the pipe is the same. It checks out and it doesn't change.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
do I see correctly in the final antenna plan that there are actually additional antennae proposed for the internal on the inside of the structure? And if you're looking at the array, there's the outside array that you see, but there are additional antennae on the inside as well.
Those are the radios, the relocated radios. I think they're new and relocated.
And we look at, okay. And where
you might notice in drawing 2 on sheet C2 that some of the boxes, some of the radios are right behind the antennas, and in the final antenna plan, those are pulled away from the direct back of the antenna and located closer to the pole, to the tower.
Yeah, because I don't see them in the existing antenna plan. I only see them. I mean, I see which ones on the outside array are being replaced, but it looks like there's just a whole array of new ones on the inside.
Yes, there are new and relocated there on the inside, attached to that existing mount.
And the mount is being shown right by those bars.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It looks like an X on the plan.
Yeah, got it. And this is all just on that second, not on the highest tier of arrays, but on that middle tier.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I showed 2 tiers just to.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I misspoke. Yes. Lower tier. Yes, I misspoke. And just to clarify, the equipment housing on the ground isn't being changed, expanded, adjusted in any way. It's the same.
The outside of it's the same. There are cables, associated cables that will run in the same path that the cables run currently. And those are shown on sheet C1.2.
And Peter, many times our techs go in and inside the shelter is just computer equipment and they play with the computer equipment, replace it, whatever, but nothing goes outside of the shelter, correct? And I don't mean they play with it. They're obviously testing it and doing what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's no visual change to those structures whatsoever.
No.
Okay.
No, the cables in fact run inside. So
right, the cables right. Okay. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Peter, couple questions. What, for the antennas that you're replacing, what frequency were they on? Or are they on?
let's see if I know that. The antennas that are still to exist are the new ones I discussed. There are existing LTE 5G antennas on there, and I don't think I have what antennas. Let's see. Yeah, I don't have the frequency of the 6 that are being removed.
I just got a text from my radio frequency engineer. If you really want to know that Rob, he's joining right now, and his name is Andrew Peterson. Eileen, can you see him? Is he?
Not yet, not yet.
Yeah, I don't see him.
Rob, do you have another question, Mr. Simon, while we're waiting for?
I was just gonna ask, and maybe it is appropriate for the radio frequency expert, just to real briefly, because the application is technically for a use variance, notwithstanding the 6409 testimony. Just to have, I guess it's the RF person, Judy, just run through quickly in terms of what the need is for these antennas, please. Thanks.
Sure. Eileen, do you see him yet?
Yes, he just came on.
Yes, okay.
And then Craig, I have another, we have an issue with Danny Duvenet, so.
Another issue?
No, I think when you removed him, instead of removing him, change role to attendee, you removed him from the meeting, and once you do that, he can't get back in, and he's got the next application.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So
How do I unremove them?
I don't know.
All right, let's
I'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
let's
Sorry.
get
Okay,
through this,
Andrew, can
please.
you put your camera on and get off mute, please? I'm texting him to say, put camera on. Ah, there you are.
Can
Hi.
you see me?
Yes, I can see you.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right,
And
Mr.
raise your
Peterson, we'll
right
need to
hand,
swear you in.
Okay, let's just swear you in. Raise
Raise
your
your
right
right
hand,
hand.
please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in tonight's proceeding to be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your name for the record, spelling your name, please.
It's Andrew Peterson. Last name's Peterson.
Andrew, professional and educational background.
Excuse me 1 second. Let me just get somewhere quiet.
You're still at the concert? He was at one of his children's concert at school tonight. So let's give him a sec.
My
There you are.
apologies.
That's
I
okay.
think it's quieter here.
Educational and professional background, please.
Sure. Undergraduate and graduate degrees in electrical engineering from Lehigh University. Been involved in the design of cellular communications facilities now for 2 decades.
And are you responsible and helping the design of the site before the board this evening?
I did, yes.
Okay, so Mr. Simon, the attorney, has a couple questions for you.
Yeah, so Andrew, just real quick, in terms of the 6 antennas that are being replaced as part of this application, what were those antennas serving in terms of frequencies and bands, et cetera?
Well, the antennas that are the focus of the application are going to serve 5G in the C band and the DoD band. So it's about 3,500 megahertz. And they're basically an addition to the site. The 700 megahertz bands will remain, the 850 megahertz bands will remain, the 1900, the 2100.
Right, but in terms of the 6 antennas that are being replaced, what bands were they on?
They were serving 700 megahertz, 850, 2100, 1900. But those frequencies will be transferred to the new antennas. So we're not losing anything here. It's basically an addition of the C band and the DoD band, which are in the 3500 megahertz. Does that answer the question?
It does. And
Good.
with regard to the fact that technically this use is not permitted in the zone, can you just quickly, and maybe Ms. Fairweather can assist you, just go through the positive, negative criteria? And Judy, you can certainly lead on this in terms of particular suitability and seek a balancing test.
Yeah, so Andrew, AT&T offers FirstNet, which was the emergency services throughout the country that it's been awarded from the FCC after 9/11, when counties couldn't get a hold of counties, states couldn't get a hold of other states. The FCC awarded AT&T a contract so that all states, all counties across the country can work together, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And under AT&T's FCC license, they have to supply coverage to everyone in the United States, not just people in industrial areas or commercial areas, but including people in residential areas, correct?
Correct.
And the pole was existing and the board had already approved the pole for this type of telecommunication use?
Correct.
And if we didn't go on this pole, then AT&T would have been before the board seeking to build a new pole that wouldn't be permitted in the same zone, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And in your professional opinion, AT&T needs this site in order to provide the coverage required under the FCC?
They do.
And does this site give any odor, obnoxious smells? Is it lit? Is there anything, does it increase any, are there any 24, or are there any employees there during the workday?
No, it's an unmanned facility. There'll be no sewer, no water. It's visited maybe every quarter, probably less, by an AT&T service technician in a small SUV, pickup truck type vehicle.
Okay, so there's no onerous put on municipal requirements, correct, to help the site?
Correct. That's right.
And if you look at the need for supplying telecommunications to the people and the people in that area and the people that pass through the area in their vehicles, do you find that that is a need for that area of Millburn?
Absolutely.
Do you see any detriment? I mean, the pole's already there. We don't require any municipal services. Do you see any detriment?
No, the pole's already existing. The changes will be, they're not perceivable to a passerby. It's really a non-issue as far as that goes.
Okay, so if you look at the detriment versus the positive criteria and the positive effect of the community, then the positive criteria and the effect on the community wins out?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Peterson? Anyone in the audience have any questions for Mr. Peterson? Okay, I see none. Okay, Judy, where do you want to take it from here?
That's my whole presentation. Under the federal law, I ask that you please comply with it and approve this de minimis improvement to the tower for AT&T.
Okay. Any questions for anyone from the board at this point? Any questions from the audience? Any comments from the audience? I see no hands raised. So I'll close the public portion of the meeting. Board members, any thoughts?
So let me just remind the board that this is technically use variance, 5 affirmative votes. But certainly it appears that because this is really a swap out from 6 antennas to 9 antennas, and the applicant, through the testimony of Mr. Smith and Mr. Peterson, has provided the basis, namely under the federal law as well as under state law, in terms of the positive negative criteria for the granting of the variance relief, and particularly the fact that there's not going to be any type of substantial change to either the pole visually or otherwise, or the equipment cabinets.
Thank you. Any comment?
So,
Go ahead, Wolfgang.
no, since this is, you're talking about federal law, the coverage has to be given, it has to be given somehow. It seems like we're on the question before the board is whether it goes here or we demand that it goes somewhere else, being placed on a new structure. And if, given that this has been in existence for a long time, it doesn't appear, it hasn't been any, at least to my knowledge, has not been any obstruction or caused any distress to anybody visually or otherwise. I don't see why this wouldn't be supported and granted. I would certainly support it.
Yeah.
Any other comment? In that case, do I have a motion?
I would make a motion to approve.
Anyone like a second? Chandru, second.
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Steve Toger,
Yes.
Wolfgang Chateauris,
Yes.
Chandru Harjani,
Yes.
Ashley Abigdor. Ashley,
Ashley, did you respond?
I did, sorry.
Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
was that a yes?
yes.
Okay. Jessica Glad,
Yes.
Craig Plattner.
Yes. Good luck with the project.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate your time. Bye.
All right, now we gotta try to get Danny back here.
You know what? I told him to sign on. What happens is if you remove him from the meeting, it's like because he did something wrong and they won't let him back in. So I had him sign on with a different computer. I think I see Daniel, so.
Yeah, he's back. Okay.
Yeah, so that's okay. Hey, we made it all this way. In the last meeting of the year, we messed up, right?
Right. Well,
Oh, well,
We didn't mess up. It's just a temporary.
temporary
departure.
glitch. That's all.
right.
But he came back.
So we're gonna do, now we're gonna do Chestnut first and Milton's last. Is that? what
That's
you said?
correct.
Okay,
Chestnut's gonna be first.
all right. So let me bring Jody. Where did
So
Joe
next-
go?
Joe was there.
Okay, well, let me bring Jody back over. Joe was here. And I'm guessing this is the Daniel we're looking for.
Yeah, that's him. So next up, for those playing along at home, is calendar 389922, S. Barcor, R. Matthews, 5 Chestnut Place in Short Hills. I see Vish has the hand up. I don't know. Is that part of this
Yeah.
application?
I don't know. Hi, Dan. Is Vish with you?
No, well, yes,
Okay.
he's with me, but he's not with me.
But
He's not-
that's your applicant. Okay.
Yeah, Vish is here. Yeah,
Okay.
Thanks for clearing that up.
it's a long
I
night.
got the mishap.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I feel like
Hey,
I was
where did
I
Joe
was put in a
go?
timeout room. I'm on my
It's
phone.
pretty-
now.
Yeah. I
I
don't know
said,
what
use your
happened there.
phone. That's sometimes, yeah, it's like if you remove them from the meeting, they can't get back in.
Yeah,
It's like it locks their
you
credentials.
violated policy or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm on my phone. It seems to be working. I hope I could navigate, but yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, wait, let's swear everybody in first.
Yep.
Everybody raise their right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in tonight's proceeding be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, I need your names one at a time, please, spelling your names.
Daniel Dubinet.
Sri Vishnu Bairakor,
Just spell your first.
SREEVISHNU.
And is it your wife that's next to you?
Yeah.
She's actually,
Blurry.
Matthews?
She's blurry.
yeah. Can you get rid of your filter? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, but-
Okay.
Spell your name, please.
REENA. My first name.
Thank you.
Okay. Who would like to start?
I would like to start and get into the project.
All right, then give us your qualifications real quick.
Okay. I was licensed in 2001 and my license is current and in good effect. I've appeared before this board and many others. It's been 21 years and I practice primarily residential architecture in our neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Qualifications are accepted. Please proceed.
Okay, so there are two variances we need for this application, and if I may, I'd like to share screen and submit that as Exhibit A1, which consists of check 4 to 5 slides to supplement what you have in your package.
Very good.
Thank you. Okay. This is pretty cool. I'm on my phone right now. So
Like, we don't see anything.
Oh,
No.
that's
Or you.
okay. Oh,
Or,
that's bad.
yeah, or you.
That's bad. Hold on.
Yeah, how this is gonna,
Maybe this won't work. Share
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
screen. Start now. No.
Yeah, I don't know if it's different on a phone.
Yeah. Well, how about we skip the exhibit?
Gonna have to.
Let's skip it. I got this. Okay. Let me just open it up on my computer then.
We don't see you, Dan.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
coming back somehow. You got me?
There you go.
Yeah, that didn't work. Let me just open up my presentation for my purposes. So the short story is what we'd like to propose is to build a master bedroom suite above the existing garage. So we won't be increasing the building footprint at all. We certainly fit with building coverage, lot coverage, FAR. So the two variances that we need for this application are both about the side yard setbacks. So the first one I'll talk about is side yard setback, and the requirement is 25 feet. And we have 21. So 21 is existing, non-conforming. Well, actually, it's existing, and then if we build on top of it, because we're located in the R3 zone, R3 zone requires a 25-foot second floor setback. So we're in violation about 4 feet. And if you had a chance to look at the survey, it's just this shaded in back corner of the garage that it's clipped. And well, you could argue, A, it's the peculiar shape of the lot. It's got very strange side yards. The existing orientation of the house on the lot. But even another very important fact is that we are in an R3 zone, and we are significantly undersized for that zone. We're even undersized for the R4 zone. So we could argue that we're closer to an R5 zone. And if we were in the R5 zone, which we are not, we would not need a variance, side yard setbacks 12. But because we're in the R3, because we're a very small lot, and because we have very odd lot lines, we get a little bit caught in the back left corner of the garage. So that's the side yard setback. Then the other one is called combined side yard setback, and that's a function of the lot width of the property. And so it's an odd shaped lot, and it's kind of wide right where you kind of calculate the lot width. So at 113 feet wide, it would require us to have a combined side yard on the left side of 27.4 feet. So again, we're going to be at 21. And the figures on that, the variances that we are seeking would be a violation of 6.4 feet. And again, just that small corner. And so one of the reasons I truly believe you could feel good about supporting this application with its hardships is the conditions of the site. So I apologize, but I don't have the photographs to show you. But if I did, and if you had a chance to see, the house has doesn't have a very strong street presence, and mostly because of the very mature evergreen trees that exist that will remain. And you really only get, as you're driving on Chestnut, 2 vantage points. One from the corner of the property, you could kind of peek in and see a little bit of the house. And then it's a circular driveway, so you get a chance to see the other side. Otherwise, it's It's very well hidden from the street. It's also very well protected from the neighbor on the left. So the neighbor you could argue would be the most affected by it really isn't affected because of a few things. One, the neighbor's house is at a much higher elevation than ours. Two, it's heavily screened. And three, there just is a lot of mature evergreens and growth and screening that exists. And I measured, there's a distance of 35 feet between the two homes. So I feel like it won't negatively impact the neighbor or the neighborhood. It'll be a nice addition to the home to update and modernize. And I don't see a negative impact by allowing this application. No trees will come down. They actually want to try and keep this very large magnolia tree right at the house, which I think they want to keep it, which anyway, so the plan is not to take down any trees as a result of this, nor would we really have to. That's the application.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Well, I shouldn't be sorry you locked me out.
Sorry about that. Any questions for Mr. Duvenet, the homeowner? Any questions from the audience? Any comments from the audience? Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, hey, Dan, where do you measure the lot width from? So you have 115 feet that's required, and you have here on your table 113 feet, but I know it's an irregularly shaped lot. Can you just comment on that for a second?
Yes, thank you. And that works against us because we measure the lot width at the front yard setback. So basically you take the imaginary line of the front yard setback and extend it from the two, which should be parallel lot lines, but you extend it. And so anyway, I come up with an existing width of 113 feet.
Right, but because it's more of a trapezoid, by the time you get to the hatched area where you're seeking variance relief, it narrows back out, right?
Yeah, it's significantly. And I apologize, I don't have that number, but you can see by the time you get to the backyard, it's only 65 feet. So it's an irregular shaped lot, and having it extra wide where we don't want it triggers an even larger combined side yard setback.
Anything else, Rob?
Nope, thank you.
Okay. Then I'll close the public portion of the meeting. Anyone have any comments? I'll go first. I mean, to me, this is a perfect example of a C1 variance. We have a lot that's substantially undersized for the zone, and then on top of that, this unusual shape, and where it's calculated the lot width was also the widest part of the lot, ironically. So it actually winds up becoming a detriment. So I think that the if you apply a little bit of the sort of R4 characteristics to the lot, that this is a not too hard of an ask. So I would support this application. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
echo those. I would echo those thoughts exactly. And furthermore, when visiting the property, you see that there's no the house next door to it. The nearest house next door to it is a significant distance away. There's not going to be any sort of impact, light wise or anything like that. And you see other houses in the neighborhood, and it's certainly not out of scale or proportion to anything around it. I think I would support this application.
Thank you. Do you have a motion in this case?
Yeah, I'll move approval.
Thank you, Amy. Ms. Second? Chandra?
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Jody Sharma,
Yes.
Steve Toger,
Yes,
Wolfgang Tatoris,
Yes.
Chandru Harjani,
Yes.
Jessica Glad,
Yes.
Rick Lintner.
Yes. Good luck with the project.
Okay, have a good holiday, guys.
thank you.
Happy holidays. Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
So with that, it brings us to our last application of the evening, calendar 389822. I will be recusing from this application, so I want to bid everyone a very happy holidays and happy new year.
And you,
And I'm
Craig.
excited to see everyone back in person on the 9th. And I think it was a great year, and everyone did an amazing job. So with that, I'm signing off. Have a great evening, folks. And I'm going to hand it over to Jessica.
Happy
Holiday.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, guys.
Thanks.
Okay, moving right along.
Give me 1 second. Joe is back here. I'm just
Okay, yeah, let's get him back
trying to
in.
get him over. He's got to accept my, there we go. And John, am I bringing anybody else over or?
Yes, the
Timothy
Miltons.
Milton. Got him. There we go.
Okay, if everybody would raise their right hand, please, whoever's going to testify. Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give in tonight's proceeding be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes.
I do.
Your names for the record, please.
Kim Reichert.
Timothy Milton. John James, architect.
Can you just spell your last name? The homeowners.
My last name is Reichard.
Milton, Milton.
Thank you.
Who is going to start speaking?
I think Tim's going to start first.
Yeah, just a quick introduction. Tim Milton, this is my wife, Kim. We currently live in Short Hills. We bought this home on 144 Highland this past summer. We're super excited to move back to Short Hills. We're both from there. I grew up just a few houses down. And I think the big issue or the big picture item for this house, we love the property. We've known it our whole lives. We love the house, the existing structure. For us, we have a 3-year-old daughter. We're hopefully growing our family. The house is really, the layout of the house was really set up a little bit awkward for a growing young family. And so the big picture item, what we're trying to do is just extend and put a 3rd bedroom on the 2nd floor so that we could all be on the 2nd floor. And with that, I'll pass it over to you, John, to handle all the details. I'm happy to address any questions or concerns.
Okay, thanks.
Could I just get your qualifications?
Sure. I have a bachelor in architecture from University of Virginia and a master's from Columbia University. I'm registered in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. All my registrations are current. I'm a principal in a 7-person architectural firm in Maplewood. I've had about 40 years experience, and I've presented before this board and numerous other ones in New Jersey many times.
Thank you. All right, qualifications accepted and you may proceed.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. Just want to make sure. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay. So these are the same documents that were submitted. So I'm going to start with, this is the site plan photograph here, and it shows where 144 Highland Avenue is located, right here in the center, near North and South Pond. 144 Highland Avenue, it's a designated property in the Short Hills Park Historic District. It was built in 1948. It was built in a French eclectic style. You can see it here in aerial view. It's on the corner of Highland Avenue and Lakeshore Drive right here.
John, are all these, I'm sorry, are all the photos that you're showing have already been submitted to the board?
Yes, they have.
Okay. I don't see them in my packet. That's why I'm asking.
Okay, do you want me to mark these as Exhibit A and we'll send you another copy?
Yeah, why not, if you don't mind?
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah. So just identify what A1 is, John.
Okay, so A1 is an aerial site plan showing the house.
So I'm sorry, so this is a collection of how many photographs in
It's a
total?
collection of 8 photographs, a site plan and 7 other photos.
Okay, so 7 photos on a site plan?
Yes.
All right, so we'll
Depicting
mark,
aerial views of the existing conditions at the property.
yep, and we'll mark it, all of that as A1.
Yes.
Just go page by page, thanks.
And then in addition to that, my only exhibits tonight, I have the existing plans that were submitted, and I have the new architectural plans.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. So it's at the corner of Highland Avenue and Lakeshore Drive. And the house fronts on Highland Avenue. You can see it here with a circular driveway. It also has a basement garage on the side that goes out to Lakeshore Drive, and you can see that here as well. So it comes in from the side of the property there. So it is an unusual site in that it tapers from a very wide front yard, like you were discussing in the last case, to a very narrow backyard. And the other condition here is that it has roads on 3 sides. So it has a condition with 3 front yards and only an existing side yard. So there are no rear yards here at all. It's curious that it fronts on Highland Avenue, but the other 2 roadways are really the private driveway that goes back to the Short Hills Club. So historically, this area behind the house has always been used as a backyard because it has beautiful views of the pond. It's very similar to 164 Highland next door. It's the same thing, which has beautiful views of the pond. Even though both of them are considered front yards, they've historically been used as backyards. They're landscaped as backyards. You can see that now. You can see here how it's laid out in the back. And you can see those beautiful views of the pond here. I'll show you another one here looking at the back as well. You can see the neighbor's pavilion and fireplace right next door here. So the hardship with this lot is there are 4 basic hardships. First, it's an undersized lot in the R3 zone, and it's about 25% undersized. So where the minimum required is 29,000 square feet, it's 22,000 square feet. There's an existing non-conforming location of the house on the lot. If I go to the plans here, let me just go to our site plan. You can see here, here's the boundary of the lot. And the existing left wing of the house is non-conforming. So in the R3 zone, we'd be required to have a 15-foot side yard setback for 1 story and 25 for 2 stories. The existing house here is 7.4 feet from the lot line. So all the variances that we're seeking, or 3 of the 4 we're seeking, are related to this unusual location of the house on the property, the shape of the property, and the fact that it only has 1 very small side yard and 3 front yards. And then, but this backyard has always and historically been used as the part that is the backyard. So tonight we're going to need 4 different variances. The first one is side yard variances related to this existing side yard. So we're kind of acknowledging that the existing house should be 15 feet off, but it's only 7.4 feet for the existing first floor. It has a 2nd floor attic that we're going to be maintaining the profile of, but we're adding 4 dormers to that attic just on the existing roof. And the addition of those dormers triggers a setback for a 2nd floor, which should be 25 feet. And our closest dormer is set at 8.4 feet on the side of the house. We also need a side yard variance. We're creating a terrace behind the new kitchen area and a fireplace there. And we're setting that to align with the existing house, so it centers directly on the room here that views the pond. And that needs a variance of, for the same 7.4 foot setback as the house, where for accessory coverage, 12 feet is required. We also need a variance for accessory uses in a front yard. Since we have a side yard, you can't place anything in. We have to put our rear yard uses somewhere, and we chose to do that as it's been historically with this house, facing the ponds. And that's in what's used as the rear yard for the house, but it's technically a front yard. So we need a variance for, a patio, for a fireplace, and for a pergola here in the rear yard. And we also need a variance because that pergola extends slightly into the front yard space. We're keeping all of the buildings set back in accordance with the step back of the lot line, but at some point we need to put something that's rectangular on that as opposed to an angle. And we chose to do an open pergola because it would be more open at the front of the house. You can see from the photographs here that it's very mature landscaping on the property. So you can see it's enclosed by trees on all sides. It's a raised property. The area where the backyard is really a private driveway that goes to the Short Hills Club. And you can see how it's nestled in this backyard with a direct view kind of overlooking the pond. And you can kind of barely see the driveway down here. So it's not a major road. The other thing is that the house, you can see, is very well separated from all of the neighboring houses. So not only is it screened on all sides, but it's about 120 feet to the neighbor across the street here. It's over 80 feet to the side yard neighbor here. There are no neighbors at the rear of the property at all. So the use of the backyard here in this front yard really does not hurt any of the neighbors or the overall neighborhood there. Let me go through the plans just to show you what we're doing. The difficult thing, as Tim mentioned with this house, is that you would think a house from the 40s might have been designed slightly differently, but we have an existing house here that only has 2 bedrooms on the first floor and 2 bedrooms on the second floor. And it really doesn't work well at all for a family of 3 or 4. So what we're going to be doing is we're keeping the footprint of the house and we're just rearranging the interiors. So down on the first floor, you can see we're maintaining the footprint of the house. Where the old kitchen is, we're putting a powder room, a mud room, and a laundry. And we're adding a small covered porch back off of that. We're maintaining the living room and the guest bedroom. And where the former master bedroom is, we're putting the kitchen, dining, and a family area that looks out to the fireplace terrace area, so that all of the family areas of the house are going to face back towards the pond. And then up on the second floor, we have an existing bedroom on this side of the house, and there was a larger bedroom here in the middle of the house. And we're going to expand the bedroom in the middle of the house to create a new primary bedroom suite that includes bedroom, bathroom, a couple of closets. And we're going to, just like this side of the house where there's a bedroom under the eaves of the roof, we're going to do the same thing over here and create a third bedroom here. And we're going to maintain the existing roof lines, except we're adding a dormer on the front and the back for views. And we're adding 2 dormers on the side for views. So we're maintaining the roof line, but adding the 4 dormers. So the fact that we have an occupiable space in an existing attic floor is a variance. And adding the dormers within those roof lines is within the 25-foot setback, from the existing non-conforming house itself. But when I show you back at the photographs, you'll see that so here's the left side of the house, and we're taking a single dormer like that, and we're going to add it to the right side of the house here, where we have an existing ventilation shaft. When we go to the front of the house, we're going to take these same two dormers and we're going to add another third dormer right here on the side. And that creates a variance too, because it's within 25 feet of the side yard setback. In this photograph here, you can see the two window dormer that's on the street facing side of the house. We're going to take a dormer like that, and we're going to put it on the left side of the house as well. Down along this edge, I'll show you the elevations, and add another single dormer here. So we're taking elements of the existing house. All the materials from the existing house, the brick and the slate roof, are going to be used in the new house because it is a historic property and it's a designated property. And so when we get to the elevations of the front, you can see we have two existing dormers. We're adding a front-facing dormer for that new bedroom. When we go to the back of the house, we have a dormer on the left-hand side, and we're going to mirror that with a new dormer on the right-hand side, which requires a variance. The area where we're expanding the roof is in the back, and that's where we're taking one of the 3-bay windows and we're doubling it so that that's where the new owner's suite will be built. And we're putting new doors in the sunroom area below. So we're going to be rebuilding the back wall of the sunroom, and we're going to be expanding out the owner's suite above that. And otherwise, we're maintaining the roof lines of the house. But you can see here on the side where we're adding two dormers also. And it's these 4 dormers that create the variances. So that's that 2-window dormer facing the street. And if you look on the other side, we're doing another double dormer like that faces the side yard in the existing roof, and another one of the single dormers like at the back here. Again, on the back of the house, we're adding some new windows and doors here in the back of the kitchen area that will face directly out to the pond. And opposite that on the other side, we're creating an open pergola that's on the back of the covered porch on this side, so that we have areas to sit out and view the pond in the backyard. So kind of in summary, we talked about the hardships that we have. The variances are directly related to all of those hardships in terms of the location on the property. There is one additional variance, which is for lot coverage. We're asking for 0.1% or 26 square feet just to achieve a rectangular paving area directly behind the house and under our arbor. Our lot is 7,000 square feet undersized, and we're asking for 26 square feet in lot coverage. This is primarily due to the layout of the existing house and the topography, in that it has a circular driveway in front. It has another driveway on the side that goes into the basement garage. So the circulation and the driveways take up approximately 50% of the allowable site coverage here. And given that we are very much undersized for the property at 25%, 26 square feet seemed like a very minimal ask. The accessory variances on the back of the house are really necessary because we have 3 front yards. This is historically used as the back of the house, and we're just maintaining that existing use. We're not intensifying it. I would like to say that the building coverage and the FARs all comply with reduced lot coverage, so we don't need any variances for any of those items. These improvements were all presented to the Historic Preservation Commission on October 6th, and we did receive a unanimous approval from them in order to go forward with the zoning variances that we're presenting to you. And these were enumerated to them at that time when they took their vote. So we feel that what we're doing is very much in keeping with the established character of the neighborhood and also of this historic house. We don't think it's going to cause a substantial detriment to the public good or to the purpose of the zoning plan. And we think there will be benefits from the improvements we're proposing on this historical house, and these outweigh any of the negatives. And for these reasons, we're asking for your vote of approval. Are there any questions?
Thanks. John, would you mind stopping the screen sharing?
Sure.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions from board members? None? Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience? I don't see any. Eileen, do you?
No. Oh, I feel why.
What?
I forgot Craig left, so he was the co-host.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, do we have any comments from anyone in the audience? Don't see any. Okay, board members, what do you have to say?
I'll go, Jess. I would support this application, given a lot of reasons. The fact that there's an odd shaped lot with the 3 front yards, the fact that it's undersized in the R3 zone, that it's the location of the house on the lot, the distance to each neighbor, 80 foot to one side, 120 feet to the other side. Everything was tastefully done. I think it fits in with the character of the neighborhood, and it's beneficial in that regard. And that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Joe?
For all the reasons that were just stated, I would agree. I'm familiar with this house. It's on a corner. You don't even know which is the front yard of the house. The truth of the matter is that it does overlook the lake. And this is, I think these changes are perfect for the house. I would be in favor of them.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Same reasons outlined, I would be supportive as well.
Thanks, Chandru. Any last comments? Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We all second.
Amy Lawrence,
Yes.
Jody Sharma,
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg,
Yes.
Steve Toger,
Yes.
Wolfgang Tatoris,
Yes.
Shanju Harjani,
Yes.
Jessica Glatt.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Yep.
Okay. So now I think I'm supposed to ask, is there anyone in the audience who has anything to say not related to something on the agenda? I don't see anything. So I think this concludes our final meeting of the year. And I wish all of you a happy holidays and a happy and healthy new year. And see many of you back in 2023. And for those who aren't returning, hope to just see you around town.
Happy holidays, everybody.
We have a motion?
I move to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Happy holidays, everyone.
I take care.
Happy
Everyone.
holidays.
Thank you to Joe and Jody. Excellent work
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
Thank
board.
you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jyoti.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll be missed.
Yep,
Bye now.
take care. Good holiday all.